Hi.
Yeah.
I goofed up on something, so I need to let you know.
Okay.
And that item's going to come back to council. It's the appointment to the Penn Fire and Police.
Oh, okay.
So mayor is the appointee.
Okay.
And then,
But you can send me.
but then we can,
Okay.
then the council would choose an alternate. So it will come back
Okay.
next meeting, and then you guys will
We
choose
won't
an
worry
alternate.
about it.
But I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to let you know. So
Yeah.
They meet next week.
When do they meet?
they meet fourth Tuesday of every quarter, so this month.
Okay.
So just so you know, if you receive an email from Kelly.
And I am happy to go.
Okay. I may go with you, and probably a good learning experience if I can.
I just love learning about finance.
Gonna let it click. Okay. Well, there's only 3 of us. I'll wait a minute longer. It's a quorum. Oh, well. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Albany City Council, which is a study session for the evening of January 22nd, 2018. The only item on the agenda for this portion of the meeting is the strategic plan. May we have a staff report?
Yes, good evening. This item follows up on your recent work session that was held by the council to review your current strategic plan, which again covers a 2-year period, fiscal year 17-18 and the current fiscal year 18-19. As part of the work session, the council received public input and also identified areas for tentative updates to the existing strategic plan. I will run through those momentarily. And again, just as background, the purpose of the strategic plan is to identify key issues, develop council direction, and establish priorities, set goals and objectives to best focus the city's resources and capacity, again, over a 2-year period for each of these plans. This process began in 2013. I'd like to refer the council to attachment 1 to your staff report, the strategic plan update table. And I'll run through the changes that were made. Again, these were based on feedback provided by the council and members of the community at our last meeting, the work session. Thank you. The first change that you see there, as I go through this document, a way to guide is the yellow column. It summarizes the change, and then as we get a little further along, you'll see some red font where language has been added.
Before we start getting into that level of detail, do you, I'm not completely sure how we're working this. Typically with a strategic plan, you start with your mission and values and vision, and then you start talking about how you're going to get there. Is the staff recommendation here that we leave the mission, that we leave that aside? What are you proposing here, and
Sure.
as far as the higher level?
This is based on direction from your last meeting. The council did touch on the mission and vision statement, and my direction from that meeting was that that would return at a later time. And so this was simply an update to your existing strategic plan in terms of specifically the action measures within the plan. The mission and vision statement, as well as your defining statement on the front of the agendas, I have a note that that will be discussed later in the spring.
Okay, and the objectives as well? The objectives remain the same?
At this point in time, but that's what this study session is intended to discuss. So I was simply going to go over the updates as directed by the council, but if you'd like to start somewhere else, that's perfectly fine as well.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand how you're envisioning this, because we don't have a facilitator. Did we talk about getting a facilitator for this process? Because it's often very helpful in strategic plans to have somebody who does these to kind of help you pull it all together and build your roadmap.
Definitely, and every 2 years we do retain a facilitator. This is an update of an existing strategic plan, and I think that's the difference. Typically, the updates and the review by council are administered by staff to council, as well as with the public.
Okay, but this is the, I'm sorry, I thought that this was the strategic plan that would guide us for 2019 to 20 and have the outlook for the following. This is just for the next few months.
Right, it covers the time frame. You see on the subject here, it covers the time frame of fiscal year 17-18, which has passed, as well as through 18-19.
Which is almost over.
Right.
Okay,
So
right ahead.
again, with the
So we're
The
just
next
making
election.
tweaks for the next few months, but once we get a budget, we're going to need to be talking about longer range.
yes, with the next it's typically after an election. So our next election in 2020, I understand that we will have 3 seats available for election of the city council. And following each election, we have a strategic planning process that then informs our budget process.
But we did just have an election, and normally, I mean, we do it 2013, 2015, 2017, and now it's 2019.
Right.
So
It's
it
every
would
2-year
normally
process.
be that 2 years. You know, I'm going to suggest something here, because it is a pretty common thing in strategic planning, at least the processes that I've been involved in, that after you've had a single strategic plan over 5 years, it's time to start thinking about the next one.
Hold on just a minute.
Pardon?
Are our microphones not on? There seems to be trouble hearing.
Oh, maybe that was, maybe my binder hit my button. Can you hear me now? Okay, good.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. You know, maybe we should set a time frame for this plan that's more than the next 6 months, but that is not the full 2.5 years that would be the normal time frame. And then we do whatever tweaks we think are kind of urgent now, and then do a planning, and then do a real strategic planning session a little later, beginning a little bit later in the year. And look at things like, do we want small town ambiance to be is that still our mission and vision and so forth? But that we don't take that up now. Is that consistent with your thinking? It just sounds like we'd be doing a little bit more now that you were thinking of leaving until 2 years from now.
As I walk through the document, you'll see there are a number of significant changes, and I'm happy to extend the time frame you have. Again, this is a study session, so all of this is certainly up for discussion.
But you're suggesting various things that you weren't planning to get done in the next 6 months.
You know, every iteration of the strategic plan, as you'll see in some of the documents that we have as part of your regular agenda packet as well, informs the next strategic plan. So if there's something when this strategic plan concludes that hasn't been completed, the council could certainly look at that, analyze why, and either update it or figure out how it should be included in the next iteration of the strategic plan. So yes, there are likely items on here that won't be completed in a short time frame. and that will inform how we then refine things in the next strategic plan, so hopefully we can be a bit more drilled in on what we can actually accomplish.
Okay, but perhaps we should be talking about a strategic plan within the coming year rather than waiting 2 years. Because this process, I think, is not, this isn't you're not thinking of this as a 2.5-year process.
We can certainly look at the timing.
Okay, good. Let's do that. All right, please continue with your presentation.
Okay, starting on goal number 1, foster a healthy and sustainable village. It's basically a reordering of the items here. We've updated the status and recommendation, relocating this first strategy from 1.1A to 1.3A. I'm just going to go off this. You go ahead and do that. Which is well, I'll get to as we get to 1.3A. In the climate action planning area, again, we've updated it and reordered it just for the timing sense. The task now under action is to develop a new climate action plan and mitigation adaptation plan, and that the implementation be presented to the council. Here you see that under action 2, annual implementation status report to the council. Item 1.2 is promote housing availability. You'll see in the strategy we've included the words affordable housing. You'll also see in action 1 that we've addressed the continuation of work with SAHA to negotiate terms and development of an affordable housing project at Cleveland and Washington. In item 3, we've updated that to add some defining language in terms of study of height limits on San Pablo and Solano Avenues, as well as other relative matters within the housing element.
Nicole, are we going to go through the entire document and then circle back to council comments and discuss items individually? Is that a preference?
Whatever your pleasure is. If you'd like to stop, if there's edits as we go through, that's certainly fine.
What do you want to do? Let's
How were you envisioning this when you guys?
let's go all the way through, and then we can come back and make our edits.
Sure. And I can speed it up here.
I just didn't want to miss my opportunities.
Moving along. Under develop a rent review ordinance, we've updated the action to monitor and evaluate with an update to council.
You know, let me make a suggestion, if this works for you, which is, why don't you go through the accomplishments? Just stick with the accomplishments for now, and then we'll go back and talk about the new elements that you're proposing.
The accomplishments.
Of the strategic plan, of the existing strategic plan, the things that, the status of each of these elements. Let's focus on that.
I'm happy to do that. We did that as part of the work session meeting, so I would hate to be repetitive. We took the update at our work session meeting, and that was informed by the council's direction on updates, which I'm presenting, and then the approach was to obtain additional feedback and hold a study session on anything that you would like to see updated. If you'd like me to go back through the status, I'm happy to do that.
I don't think we need to review that.
Well, we don't need to redo anything that we've already done. And we're not going to do anything high level, so we're only going with the low level items. So in that case, why don't we go one by one through the low level items, and people can ask questions and make comments as we go along. But we do need to work in our public comments.
Right.
And maybe that should actually come first, since people are going to have suggestions that they want to have worked in as we work through these specifics.
Okay, then I will conclude my
So-
presentation at this point and simply note for the council and the members of the public that anything that you see included in red is an update based on feedback provided by the council at the work session.
Okay, good. Do we have comment slips?
Shouldn't council ask questions and comments first?
Sure, we can.
Okay, I mean, I think it just seems,
Well, not comments, but questions, yes.
okay, then I'll hold, because if I want to add something, it's a comment, not a question, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Do you have questions? Any questions on this side? We'll have another chance to ask questions as we go through it, but we'll be doing them one item at a time. Because I think if we go through 14 pages, and then people are going to lose track of what they were going to be asking.
Okay, then I do have a question then.
Okay.
On 1.1b, we did receive a suggestion regarding electrification of heating. And my question is that part of the strategic plan, or is it better served to be within the climate action plan? It would seem to me that perhaps it's better in the CAP, or however we're going to call that, because here it's talking about developing a new CAP and providing updates. So it seems to me, but my question, keep this question, is where then does something like that go?
Yeah, and I think, and we have that commentator with us tonight, I think that the notion was to accelerate it. But it may be something that need not be worked into the strategic plan, but could be part of the work plan for planning and zoning to make that an immediate action item. Did you? Maybe, yeah, Jeff, you'd be a good person to address this.
With respect to the issue of, or the policy decision whether to require electrification of certain appliances is a rather complex one, and there are a lot of dimensions to it, so it's probably doesn't fit well into this kind of a matrix. For me, from my perspective, I think making it a part of the climate action plan, which is going to get wrapped up here in a few months, is probably the best place to do it. But it's council's discretion. If you want to ask us to address that sooner, we can do that separately. I think you're correct that we would start with the Planning and Zoning Commission if you wanted to be vetted publicly with one of your commissions. Climate Action Committee also would be a place where that would be appropriate to discuss.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer what you were asking?
Yes.
Okay. Further questions?
Not on, we're on section 1, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So are there public comments on the proposed strategic plan?
I have speaker cards.
Okay.
Jim Beller, Susan Renault, Preston Jordan. First three.
Well, hi, Jim Beller, Albany resident. I was very happy to see homelessness mentioned in continuing outreach. And I'm happy to see we're going forward with the SAHA plan. And I would like to say that today's low income doesn't really house the people I've been seeing on the streets. Today's low income housing doesn't house the people we really need to house. And many of them will take considerable support as well as just a place to live. And I hope that can be incorporated into the SAHA proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Renault. As a 22 Year resident of Albany, I'm proud to be part of a community which actively addresses issues of climate change, inclusivity, campaign finance, and affordable housing, to name a few. The recent efforts in disaster preparedness assure me that there is a plan in place to take care of our hurt and displaced in crisis. My main criticism of the draft strategic plan is prioritization. In my volunteer roles at the Showers Program and at the Resource Desk, now Albany Cares, I've had the privilege to meet many Albany residents, some of whom are unhoused or on the verge of being unhoused. The cause may have been a divorce, health issues, loss of employment, drug dependence, domestic abuse, PTSD, or any combination of circumstances. If you live, shop, or work in Albany, you have noticed an increase in people sleeping on the streets or in vehicles. These are our neighbors, and they are in crisis. I'm suggesting that in Albany, people in crisis should be our priority. We have no low-income housing units. We have no shelters or transitional housing. We have no designated safe places to park or tent. The housing project with Saha is clearly going to take years or even decades to provide perhaps 60 units. Our friends and neighbors are in need today. This is a disaster for which we have not prepared. I understand that like many Bay Area communities, we are short on space, but I believe that this plan does not properly prioritize the use of space we do have. Each advisory board of the city has a part to play in solving this, so each should be charged with prioritizing ways to serve the needs of our neighbors suffering housing instability. Every relevant section of the plan should reference those neighbors and reflect an urgency in solving this crisis. This is not an either-or situation. We can prioritize humans over art and still have art. We can prioritize humans over parks without losing parks. But we cannot claim to be a progressive and welcoming city while ignoring our neighbors in crisis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Preston Jordan. Thank you to those of you who responded and all of you who read the many messages I sent over the weekend. I'm confused as to what's the criteria for inclusion in this plan or not. I mean, there's many items in here that are primarily the work of an advisory body, and then they come up to the council for approval. So that doesn't seem like a bright line criteria for what's included and what is not included. So I think that would be helpful to understand. I'm also baffled that this might only be a 6-month update rather than the plan for the next 2 years. The last 3 times this has come up, it's been adjusting the plan for the following 2 years for that council legislative session, if you will. It seems like the council is spending quite a bit of time on this with all these work sessions, and so for this to only to apply to the next 6 months, are you actually going to go through something more substantial 6 months from now? I don't know. I'm totally confused at this point. In terms of priorities, I sent 6 items to you, and I'll just discuss 2 of them here. Building electrification already came up. And the reason I think that's an immediate priority is because due to the fact that Albany has reduced, due to the grace of its voters and your action, the parking requirements in the R3 zone, there's a number of project developers who've come to planning and zoning with conceptual plans exploring what it is that planning and zoning might be willing to approve. They have not put in a permit application yet. My understanding is at the point at which they do that, the design and requirements on that building would be held to the code at the time of that application comes in. If those building applications come in while we still allow natural gas, we're going to lock in natural gas use in those buildings for decades and decades, which is going to be heading us in the wrong direction relative to our climate action and greenhouse pollution reduction goals. Pretty much all studies show that we need to stop need to start moving away from using natural gas for heating starting in about 2020. And so that's right around the corner. Again, if you don't take action, these new buildings that are now coming up could get locked in with natural gas. waiting for the climate action plan to be adopted. In my experience last time the climate action plan was developed, it was about a year from when it started being developed to when it was actually formally adopted by the council. And then, so if you wait for that and then subsequent to that you do an electrification policy, it could be a year and a half from now, and all those buildings could already have permit applications in. The other item that I brought up that I believe is of immediate concern is to set a date certain for adopting a soft story seismic retrofit ordinance for multi-unit buildings. ABAG released a study last spring that indicated 1 out of 5 to 1 out of 4 residences in Albany would be made uninhabitable by a magnitude 7 Hayward fault earthquake. That is catastrophic for the city. That is far beyond any other risk that the city faces. So getting those buildings underway for fixing is critical. Thank you.
Thank you.
After Alan Maris would be David Danby, Julie, and Ed Field.
There we go. Alan Maris, Albany resident. I'd like to thank you for putting a specific project in the housing section. And that's the Saha project that we're considering at Cleveland and Washington. Our mission statement says that we're a community serving the diverse needs of a diverse community. And we have a portion of our community which is growing. And it's a part of diversity, and that's our low income and people who can no longer afford housing in Albany. I think the project that you've listed there goes a long way to trying to correct that need. And I would urge you to go as quickly as you can. I know that Saha you've been engaging with Saha for about 6 months. At least you started in July, or we heard that you started in July. And I really feel strongly by now we should have some kind of a progress report for the public on the status of this project. There's a lot of potential for really meeting the needs at that site. So I would appreciate hearing from the state about the status of the project as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, David Danby speaking. In my over 30 years as a resident of Albany, I don't recall any significant plan for the construction of so-called affordable housing being promoted by numerous city councils or staff. Now it's a major issue in the Bay Area and the United States, and it's time for Albany to live up to its claim of creating a welcoming city by quickly moving forward with plans to provide affordable housing at the Washington and Cleveland site. In addition, it's time for us to acknowledge those citizens in our neighborhood who are experiencing homelessness. When we state we welcome and value all of our diverse community members, regardless of where they're from, who they love, how they worship, how they look, their abilities, and how they vote, it is now time we add housing status to that list. I also ask you to consider creating a commission to survey the opinions of Albany citizens about affordable housing and investigate sources of funding to support those experiencing homelessness. The commission could also consider regulations to control and tax or even prohibit Airbnb types of rentals in Albany and encourage more accessible dwelling units to be built and then rented to those experiencing homelessness, with rents being subsidized by government and nonprofit funds. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to start by thanking you for at least putting this item in the 2.2 in the, no, 1.2, the affordable housing and working with Saha. I'd also like to reiterate what David said about the short-term rentals. A lot of cities, I spent a lot of time looking at what other cities are doing. There are a lot of restrictions. Some cities say you can't rent for less than 30 days. You have to have a business license, you have to collect taxes, and you have to enforce both of those. Some cities are saying they have to be owner-occupied, so you can't buy a house, rent it out as Airbnb, and then live somewhere else. They're encouraging single rooms, but not other things. I think these short-term rentals take away from the potential for having truly affordable housing in Albany, and that's already sorely lacking, as people have already mentioned. I'd like to see you address these short-term rentals as part of the larger picture of really committing to providing housing that is affordable for all people, including those who have little to no income. And as Susan mentioned, there are people living in Albany who are in crisis, and we need to address that. The other items in your strategic plan, 2.2, the commitment to reaching out to the community, I really want to address that. I'd like to see a commitment to put into your strategic plan to increase the racial, cultural, age, and economic diversity on city bodies such as commissions and the city council, as well as staff members and city departments like the police and the fire department. For example, the new police chief is a white man, just like the previous police chief, and there was no external search, as I've already mentioned to you, but I just want to bring it up again. That's a good way to get people that don't look like white men, is by doing an external search. In a city that claims to be committed to diversity and inclusion, Albany falls far short. As described in your strategic plan, there seems to be no effort to find creative and effective ways of increasing this diversity. I would also like to see a requirement that every commission include at least one student who's 19 years old or younger. I'd like to see a commitment to creating a more hospitable and welcoming environment at meetings held by the city, in particular these meetings, the city council meetings. Community members should feel encouraged and welcomed by council. We should be thanked for taking the time to actually come to a meeting and speak up. You could start the meeting by smiling, saying hello, and saying, we're so glad you're here, because this is how a democracy works. We encourage you to not only come to our meetings, but to bring your friends. Make every effort to reach out to the community, not simply through the city website and through emails, but by literally reaching out, showing up and talking to people in the community through churches, schools, businesses, clubs, the library, the community center, scout troops, wherever community members get together. You should be reaching out, letting them know that you need them to be here, or the city can't function as it should. Treat this as if you were running for office. Only what you're trying to do is get people to come to the meetings. The default shouldn't be a council chambers that is usually empty, and those of us who do come to speak frequently feel as if we're inconvenience you by being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ed Fields. I would just add to what Julie said, referring to the folks out here as something other than the audience. You know, you come up with a word, the public, citizens, whatever, but we're not just the audience. I want to talk about small-town ambiance as it affects the strategic plan. So I realize we're not doing the mission statement right now. Ambiance is the character or atmosphere of a place. I would say it's the feeling you get when you're in a certain place. So we should focus on the place, not the feeling. San Francisco doesn't have small-town ambiance, nor does Paris, I think. Does Berkeley have small-town ambience? How about El Cerrito? Should Albany? What kind of place do we want Albany to be? Why are we planning to add an additional step and more scrutiny before a chain store can locate on Solano Avenue? Small-town ambience doesn't have to mean no growth. Could we double the population of Albany and still have small-town ambiance? Where would those additional 18,000 people live? Do we upzone R1 zoned neighborhoods? Remember, Measure D downzoned some neighborhoods. That's really what Measure D was, not a parking measure. Scott Wiener has a bill that could allow apartments in single-family zoned neighborhoods. How tall would the buildings have to be on San Pablo Avenue? That's for 18,000 more people. How tall do we want the buildings on San Pablo Avenue to be? And do we want to encourage affordable housing by only allowing more height and density for projects that include affordable housing, rather than giving additional height and density for all projects, and then the incentive isn't there anymore? And I would just note, El Cerrito has built or has plans for developments with a lot of affordable housing, and many of them are only 4 stories tall, even though they could have built taller. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the words of my predecessors are just fabulous. I want to support what they said. For those of you who do not know, I am homeless and have been such for 3.5 years. This week, my car broke down. I live in my car. It broke down. It created a monumental crisis for me in logistics where I sit with it. I used up my last tow with AAA. I can't move it. I am in crisis. I am a homeless person, Phi Beta Kappa from UC Berkeley, and I'm starting graduate school on Thursday, and I don't know how I'm going to proceed with this crisis in front of me. The point is that there are many homeless people whose lives day-to-day, 24/7, 365, are in major emotional, physical, financial crisis. And I want to encourage and support this body to move as quickly as possible to resolve the homeless issue, the housing issue in our community. Many people like myself contribute. We're educated. I know many homeless people with fancy degrees from Oxford and Stanford and Berkeley, and they contribute. We're not just drug-crazed people out there on the railroad tracks. We want to support the contributions of homeless people because their lives matter. And I want to support and encourage you to please get on with it, with this thing with SAHA, with this development and others that could include all of us. And this town wants to promote inclusion in a diverse community, and we are part of that community. The whole community is in crisis because we are in crisis, and that pulls down the community. I want that we could look forward to a town that supports every member of this town, people who don't have a house or people who do. It's amazing to me that when a big crisis happens, an earthquake or a flood or a fire, and it damages homes that people live in, there's some support for them, but there isn't support for the homeless people that live in that community too. We are a town, we're professing to be a town of inclusion and diversity. I just happen to be homeless because I'm poor and I'm disabled, and I have a lot of things that happened in my life that contributed to that. That's not my fault. We are not people to be shunted away. I want to support this, please. Move forward as quickly as we can. If you can rearrange some codes or whatever it is you need to do. I think that Paradise and Santa Rosa have been working hard to reduce those code barriers so we can get on with it. But thank you very much for putting this on your agenda tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mostly want to speak in support of the people who spoke before me so eloquently. I won't try to be as eloquent. I want to affirm that these are priorities. The homeless support and affordable housing. I've had many years of construction, so I know this affordable housing that SAHA is working on and the City Council working on is going to be years and years in the future, and the homeless crisis is immediate. So I think there has to be as much emphasis on helping people who are not going to be able to wait years to move these affordable housing units. I think we all have creative solutions, some of them regional. This is not an Albany problem, this is not a county problem or state problem, it's a national problem. But we can work in concert with other communities in this area, I think, to work on this problem. We also have to work as a community within the city limits of Albany, and I think there are solutions we can come up with as well. I've had some ideas about mobile home type of settlements for people with vehicles who are, at least have a vehicle to live in. There could be more support services, showers, bathroom facilities, and laundry and so forth that could be provided for people who do have vehicles and also for people who don't have vehicles. The shower program I've been volunteering with is part of that, but certainly not the whole solution. And It's just one small step, and I think we have to be creative as communities to work together to find many other small steps that can lead to larger solutions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Brian Parsley, Albany resident. Just clarification, is this discussing just item section 1 or the entire?
Any item within the strategic plan that you.
Wow. Okay. I think as some of the previous speakers stated, an update on the course of the SAHA negotiations would be great. The engaging our diverse community, that is a very difficult one. I think communication is probably the key in that. If we want to look at advisory bodies and how do we reach out, I think actually the council did a very good job this year of reaching out. But the fact remains that the reality is the school district is always going to pull away more people than the city is going to be able to. There's site council, there's PTSA. I mean, there's other things that people and the members of the community are going to do other than come serve on an advisory body. I think it's difficult. I think it can be done, but I think the key is communication. I think that there are certain, it's a two-way street. I mean, you have to, as a community member, you have to want to be involved. And I think it's easy to say that the council isn't doing a very good job or the city isn't doing a very good job, but it's a two-way street. I think there's improvement needed on both ends, on the community's end and on the city and the council's end. And I think the key is finding how we can do that together, because that's the only way it's going to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Does anyone want to speak up? Okay, then we're going to bring it back to the council. Let me ask the council for your perspective on this issue of 6 months versus 2 years and 6 months. Are we all comfortable leaving the mission and we don't have a value statement, but we have a vision statement, leaving that and the objectives and strategies as they are, and just going to the actions and effectively building something that might look a bit like a work plan for a period of time? Or is there a desire to take up issues like the mission, the city's mission, in a shorter period of time? Just so that when we go through these, we know of what our time frame is that we're talking about.
Well, I can't honestly remember if we've taken this up every year in the early part of the year and then it took effect in July 1st, or if we assumed that after we discussed it and made the changes that it took effect almost immediately. I think more like the latter. But I'm okay with whichever timeline. I might suggest that if the timeline is going to be the fiscal year and the plans start in July 1st, that if we want to proceed with changes to the mission statement, et cetera, that we go ahead and schedule that for sometime in the future between now and July 1st, and then a final revision of the strategic plan closer to the July 1st date after that, after we've done with the mission statement and others. I guess that would be my suggestion.
That makes sense to me. It might mean some reorganization of our work. Does that work for you, Nicole?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I mentioned as part of the work session, I was directed that the mission and vision statement would be addressed by the council in the spring. So that was the intention.
Okay, and that is everybody's will.
Yeah, I would like to see us have some discussion at some point about what the mission statement is. I personally, I think I might have started that ball rolling when I said I wasn't quite sure what ambiance meant in a mission statement. And then we had a brief discussion, and then we talked about, well, this is something we should talk about in the future. I doubt very much our mission statement is going to change. It might get tweaked a little bit. We might define some of the terms, such as ambiance, that it's a big term, and it's not something you can, one man's ambience is another's, environment. It's just one of these wide open terms. And I think if we talk about what it means to each of us, we might be able to define those ideas a bit better. I don't think anything that we're proposing in terms of future actions and tasks are going to be upended by this potential mission statement.
I wouldn't think so. But, on the other hand, in nonprofits and organizations, we always talk about being mission-driven, that we always keep in front of us the mission that we're trying to achieve. And so there is some significance to it, and I don't want to dismiss that. The way that we talk about our city does have a lot to do with how we go about decision-making in a forum like this. So,
and that's true, but a lot of organizations that you or I might have been involved with, or businesses or things like that, can often focus that mission on. And cities, I think, by definition, are pretty broad. We do a lot of things that we have to accomplish. Housing is one of those, but also public safety. Preventing, the town from burning down, keeping the roads halfway decent. It goes on and on and on. So, it's a little hard to define.
I agree with that. And a lot of those basic things are like putting on your own mask first, that there's just a lot that we have to do as a city. But we need to identify our decision space for prioritizing a certain number of things. And let's make that our focus, just something that is rather more like a work plan than a mission-driven strategic plan. And we'll come back and see if we can tie those elements back together towards the end.
And if I may, as you see, the date on this plan is June 30th, 2019, with the intent that to inform the next budget process, as I mentioned in the spring, we would address what the next strategic plan looks like and have a discussion with the council about what that process should look like, and if it should have a different framework, if it should be something completely different than what we have now. And so that is definitely intended. As I dove in, perhaps prematurely, simply what I'm presenting is the updates that have been provided by the council and the community at the work session for this strategic plan before us.
Okay.
But I have a little concern here now, because if this goes until June 30th and we are drafting our budget off of this and we are implementing our CIP off of this, which I understand was always sort of our idea of twining these all together, I don't want to then later in the spring go, now we're going to do something totally different, and nothing relates to anything. So I think what we do here really does impact us for the next, it's a 2-year budget cycle, it's a 5-year CIP. So I think what we do here goes further than June 30th.
Yes.
And I think we need to be really clear on that. And I think if we say, well, this only goes till June 30th, and before then we'll do it again, maybe that's not what you're saying, but I think that's what I'm hearing, and that concerns me.
Okay.
What I'm hearing is what you're saying is it informs it. Now, we still have a budget to do, and we don't have that information yet. We don't have all the financial information we need to know kind of what our decision space is, how much funding is going to be available for different things that we might want to do. There's a lot that we're going to be learning between now and the later part of the spring as the term for this strategic plan, the one we already have, is coming to a close. So I would say it definitely, what we're doing today is going to strongly inform anything that we do within the next few months, but it doesn't necessarily lock us in. And it can't, because we don't have all the information that we're going to need to adopt a 2-year budget. Does that make sense?
Let's keep going.
All right. So we're back to the plan. Section 1, Goal 1, Objective 1.1, strategy, what was B, but is now, I guess, going to be A, correct? Because what was A is going to be moved to 1.3. And this is implement and evaluate climate action plan. Are we in agreement on action number 1, developing a new climate action plan?
Why?
And do we, I mean, I don't think we, go ahead.
Well, I mean, isn't that like 2?
The changes to the document are in red. Everything else was pre-existing.
Right.
So you're adding the language, provide yearly CAP implementation updates to council in coordination with the Climate Action Committee.
Right.
Is this adequate for people? Do we want a deadline, or are we comfortable with this being underway and expected to be completed in 2019? That does mean it could be late in the year. Are we comfortable with the with leaving this as proposed?
You're on develop new climate action plan? You're here.
I'm on Goal 1, Objective 1.1, Advanced Climate Action, Strategy, what has been B, but which I believe will now become A.
I don't understand what you're doing.
If you'd like me to walk through the changes, I'm happy to do that. They're in
Okay,
red
why don't you walk through the change in advancing climate action?
Okay, it's in red. It's on page 2 of the document. It is basically after the climate action plan is developed that the council will receive annual updates in coordination with the Climate Action Committee.
Perfect.
Okay, when is the next climate action plan due?
The
council?
preparation of the CAP is underway and should be completed in 2019. We don't have a hard and fast date for that yet. The process is currently underway.
Okay, the timing in the previous plan was FY 18-19, so I think that we were expecting it by June 30th. But it sounds like that may not be something we can count on. Does anybody, should we just leave it open? Are people comfortable with that? Okay, then we leave it open. Thanks. Okay, let's do 1.2, promote housing availability.
Again, the changes are in red. We've added the words affordable housing to the strategy A. In terms of actions, we've added continue to work with SAHA to negotiate the terms of the affordable housing project. And then on item 3, under action, we've added some additional detail to address specific interests with regard to study of height limits, nexus fee, and other elements related to implementation of housing laws.
And I would take it that one, in the light of all these proposals that are coming out of Sacramento almost on a weekly basis, and the whole idea of CASA, that's kind of a moving target. You know, as much as we might plan for changes in our development standards, they might be coming to us as quickly as we were able to make them.
Do we want anything in the plan, and I think we talked about this last time, to encourage the development of ADUs and/or to discourage their use or tax their use as vacation rentals?
I think, aren't we going to have that discussion about vacation rentals and things? Maybe we want to have that discussion first to get a clear idea of what's going on with that, rather than make it that specific. I mean, certainly we should be promoting accessory units, but adding that vacation rental part of it, I'd like to have that discussion before we find it that way.
I think we need to have a little bit of a conversation here about the difference in a strategic plan and things. I think things like that are things that planning and zoning should be looking at, so it's a much lower level discussion, and have it on their work plan. So this is kind of an overarching theme: update codes to support housing and urban development. So we're trying to support, what I understand from that is more housing. And then the real detail of ADUs or those things go through planning and zoning. And I think otherwise we're going to end up with a strategic plan that has a million things in it. And I think we need the committees to be doing some of this work.
But we do go to the detail of investigating floor area ratio regulations, height limits on specific business streets, and so forth. I'm just wondering if we should do anything more to heighten and spotlight the need to promote accessory dwelling units, or just leave that to planning and zoning. Councilman Pilch, do you have any comments?
Yeah, so I think that in general, I would agree with the Vice Mayor about this being more of a high-level document and not getting down into the details of things like floor area ratios. I think that is actually, et cetera. But I don't think we need to spend a lot of time necessarily niggling about the existing language. If we think ADUs was addressed once by the planning and zoning, certainly they could address it again. I would be in favor of actually changing that added language to less emphasize state housing laws and more emphasize whatever incentives we can give to developers or regulations we can give to developers to develop affordable units or develop housing. I would like kind of a high-level emphasis on doing the appropriate things, doing whatever we can. I'm not sure how to, I can't wordsmith that there, but, and if you want to add ADUs specifically, I think that's fine, although I don't think that's going to particularly add a lot of housing stock in Albany compared to other things.
It is part of it's kind of a high-level piece of this. Talks about senior secondary units, affordable housing. Maybe that's all.
What if we took this number 3 and just made it high level and said update codes to support housing and urban development, and leave out the floor area ratio regulations and so forth? We leave that to the Planning and Zoning Commission work plan. And when we look at the Planning and Zoning Commission work plan, we can look at whether there's anything we want them to do to incentivize the construction of accessory dwelling units.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but just as long as it's clear that they have that broader mandate to look at everything as so, I mean, some of these things were in the past somewhat sacred cows, FAR or height or setback or whatever. I think it's time we have to look at all that stuff.
Yes. And I want to reassure, I know we had a comment about height limits. That is part of what we will look at when we look at the planning and zoning work plan.
Could we include the word update codes to support increased housing?
Yeah.
Sure. How about increased housing and shelter? There may be opportunities to offer shelter in Albany, and we don't want to neglect that. Does that work for the staff?
Sure.
Doing it that way? Okay. All right, now 1.2 1.3A will now be, okay, I see how you did that. But that's, so when you move things, that's not in, those changes are not in red. It's just the additional language.
Right. The only changes are the things that the council directed as part of the last meeting, and they're in red.
Okay. So are we updated the status.
But I think the confusion here is this is on here twice, which I didn't really realize until right now. Implement active transportation plan is 1.3, but it's also 1.1.
That's what I was confusing you about
It's
before.
relocated. That's all we're doing. We're striking it from 1.1A and moving it here to 1.3A.
Yeah.
So it won't be duplicated.
Took me an hour, but I got it.
So the issue, a request for construction bids, is something we're doing tonight.
Not, well, yeah, it is one project, a paving project, as part of your regular agenda item.
But then we'll be done. Is there more that we want to, perhaps there is more that we want to insert here, and I'm going to suggest that this be something we come back to as part of that spring effort, is figure out what are our next steps on implementing active transportation. And we keep securing grant funding. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is there, isn't it time to update the active transportation plan? Is that on here somewhere?
It is due for an update. It will definitely involve quite a process, and I don't know that it would be accomplished in this time frame. What you see here are active projects, but that can certainly be considered within your next iteration of this plan as well.
Okay. We'll look at that in the spring.
It's also something that's on staff radar as a responsible department head.
And securing grant funding is always something that we want to keep active in this area, right? All right. Implement the Complete Streets Plan. Any comments on these items? All right. And then it appears that we'll be implementing the sidewalk policy because it's complete. I think it's important that the importance of sidewalks be, and continuing that program be included here, but that is part of, I assume that is part of the active transportation plan and something that we can work in when we go back to that in the spring. Okay, 1.4, manage parking. We talked, I think this was yours, Pete.
Yeah, I brought it up at our last discussion about this, basically because, you know, for me, there's other reasons to consider some of the managed parking issues around parking permits or meters as they relate to housing, for one, or to our climate action plan, or to other things. And we've always looked at the parking issue as a strictly, well, if there's enough spots, we don't need to manage it. But I think there's other arguments to why we might want to do that. So I'm not sure when this study session might happen, but I think it's a good idea.
It was included in there based on the comments provided by council. My thinking on this was it gives you a starting point to sort out what programs may be of interest so that we could focus our resources on how to research those and present information back. But first having a discussion about what the interests may be to help define how we work through bringing you more information on any of those program opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Would the whole subject of managing parking maybe be another thing that belongs in the Transportation Commission's work plan?
Mm-hmm.
That they, because they have a lot of priorities too, This would be one of them, and I think that we need to look at what they're going to have on their plate and whether a study, they'd be the logical entity to do the first study session.
That's true, but there's other, the point I'm trying to make is there's other aspects to this whole parking thing which I think relate to housing, relate to our climate action plan, other development standards. And, it's subtle, but I'm not sure the Transportation Commission, kind of looks at it through this one set of glasses, and perhaps it's only council that can kind of look at the broader scope of it.
And kind of weave them together.
Yeah.
And the council could certainly direct the traffic, and what is their new name? The Transportation Commission to conduct a supplemental analysis depending on which direction you're interested in pursuing.
It's definitely at least a land use issue, so I agree.
Okay, so are people comfortable with keeping that in? All right. 1.5, partner with other local governments to maintain and improve hospital services in our area. It doesn't look like there's a change, just a status update. Seismic safety, 1.6, investigate seismic safety program incentives, including an update to current policies. Now, we received a comment about that, and I think that the comment was essentially a request to set a deadline, to make it, to be certain that this moves forward promptly because of its life or death nature. Any comments from the council on how we might go about strengthening this or not, or how people want to pursue it? No? Anything?
I think it's a good idea to pursue some kind of soft story ordinance on multifamily. I don't know whether that's something that could be done through planning and zoning or directly to the council. I mean, ultimately, it would be an ordinance regarding construction, but...
No, this is the retrofit. This is, and you see it all around Berkeley now. When you see soft story buildings, you're seeing these structures that have been added.
It's been done in some places in Albany, too. There's a place next to the pub that had a soft story, and they redid that. But whether we should have an ordinance that requires it, by such and such a date is the question.
Yeah.
Well, it says here, community engagement to be initiated early 2019.
Yes, we have that scheduled, tentatively scheduled for your February 19th meeting to hold a study session on this topic.
Right.
Okay, so are people satisfied that it's strong enough?
Yeah.
Councilman Pilch, you're looking thoughtful.
I think so. It'd be easy to have a study session and then for this fall to fall lower on the priority list, but I'm comfortable with that for now. I'd hate to put a deadline on staff that staff can't meet. I do agree with the urgency of it, but looks like I'm comfortable with it for now because there is action already planned to move forward. So yeah, I'm okay.
Okay. All right. 1.8, prioritize, 1.7, prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco products. Everyone's okay with leaving that in there as it is. 1.8, prioritize improvements to public infrastructure, including streets and street lighting. I have a suggestion about this that I would like to make this the first. I'd like to change it from being 1.8 to being 1.1. Because now I'm confused about my numbering. Wait a minute. Okay. Oh, not one. Yes. Wait, that would put it ahead of promoting housing availability. How about making this 1.4 after active transportation and safety, because it's very closely related to those. It is a very high priority, and although some of these other things are very important and high priorities, I think this is the one that we're hearing loud and clear. Our pavement is now among the worst in the Bay Area, and our lighting is really of deep concern. So I'd like to move this up. And apart from that, I think it's been well worded, and I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
Do others feel the same? Okay, so let's make that one 1.4. 1.9, consider adding historical element in design guidelines. And this is a planning and zoning issue. I like having it in the strategic plan, because we have had a few things of concern happen, and making it a priority makes sense. Does that work for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Consider implementing social host laws, including vehicles. Is this has this been vetted through the police department? Is this something we need? I thought that California had gotten pretty tough on social host issues in recent years. Do we need it?
Well, I brought it here. I haven't had a lot of conversation with the chief, but I've had a little bit. I think it's worth looking into and deciding if we want to pursue it on our level. A lot of cities are implementing their own laws, so I think it's worth
Could you
evaluating.
define social host? Is this like the vacation rentals or?
No, it's if you go out of town or you go out for the evening and your underage child has a party, and you are responsible.
Oh, I know about that.
Pete is in charge.
Well, there's a lot of cities. I think that Berkeley has probably had a social host ordinance for 20 years. There was a time when the state law was not as strict, and so cities were adopting their own laws. But I think that they're pretty strict now. But if it's like parking management, if we want to do a study session, if there's a strong appetite for that, I certainly have no objection. You? Okay. Update dated ordinances, bingo and sign ordinance. I have a whole list of these somewhere of ordinances that we need to overhaul. Is that a priority from the staff perspective? Do these issues come up often enough to, or should they be part of sort of a master update at some point of the entire code?
The code is certainly dated in various sections and does require updating as we can prioritize those, and some have more gravity than others. These were both raised by Vice Mayor McQuaid.
Would you be comfortable with just leaving it more general, just saying, review, comprehensively review ordinances and identify the most urgent for updates?
Sure.
Okay.
May I suggest that since time is zipping by here, and we're only on number 1 of 6, I think, that we only look at the ones with the red?
Good idea.
Well,
okay, if you don't want to, then let's charge ahead quickly.
I think we can just go through them quickly. It's not, all right, connect with and engage the community. That all looks fine to me. Does anybody want to make any changes there? Hosting a youth summit, I think that could be a lot of work. I don't think that there's anything wrong with a council member wanting to host something, but I'm really reluctant to put the staff to work on this. It just does not seem like enough of a priority. But if others feel differently, I'm fine with it.
Well, I put it on because when we did our outreach to get people onto the advisory bodies, we did get some youth, I wouldn't say a sizable amount, but we did get some youth that had some interesting ideas, and I thought, well, we're certainly not going to be able to seat them all, but let's engage them while we sort of have an interested group of people that are wanting to be part of the city and have things to tell us. My goal was that, as vice mayor, that I would sort of take this on, with backup from staff, but I think that we can do it with a minimal amount of staff, but we certainly can remove it from here and.
Here's an idea. I know that this is something Pete is very interested in as well. What if the two of you were kind of a subcommittee and put this on?
Yeah, I'd be happy
interest you?
to. Yeah, and I think we could work with some existing organizations like Youth in Government that might be.
I just don't
I've already
want
talked to them.
to make it a staff work issue. Okay, we're dropping the policy of including evaluation of options for low-income exemptions. Now, we did get a comment on that to try to add to our scorecard, actually tracking the number of the percentages of people who claim this exemption. That seems like a perfectly reasonable idea. I don't think it needs to be in this document, though. Are we in agreement on that? Okay.
As long as we're in agreement that we direct staff to do so.
Well, wait, I think we need to think about that. I'm fine with taking it out of here, but I would assign it to an advisory body. And I think perhaps SEJC could come up with, they're interested in a survey, perhaps they can weave all of this together. I want to be careful we don't say, well, staff can do that.
What exactly is the ask?
I think that the ask is to quantify, keep a tally of the percentage of low-income homes that claim versus those that do not claim their exemptions.
I think it's rather part of just how we communicate with the community and making sure people are getting the message that there are such things. And I know we've sent out postcards, but sort of thinking broader term of how we can look at all of the communication.
But I think the point, though, was to be sort of specific about quantifying it, to be sure we keep an eye on it. I'd like to do that also with our East Bay Community Energy. Well, I'm sure we'll come to that, but how many people are opting up? We adopted a policy of encouraging people to opt up to renewable, but we don't, have a scorecard. I think that a scorecard is probably something we should come back to with the work that we do in the spring.
Yeah, remind me about that. They do have a scorecard, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
But I think just for staff's context, there was an email titled Low Income Tax Provision Utilization, which outlines the ask. And I think the vice mayor was saying that task could fall under SEJC to make sure that we get that or do that update every year.
And that's why I'm asking for the clarification, because counting the number of people subscribing to the program is extremely different than setting a threshold of what percentage you want to have subscribed and having some sort of obligation to get to that number. So if you'd like it to be something that SEJC is tasked with, perhaps they could discuss it and review it and provide some recommendations. That certainly works as well.
That's a good idea. And having not sustainability, climate action, do the same with the East Bay Community Energy.
I think the ask in the email from the public was, please adopt a number of households utilizing the provisions as a goal in the strategic plan. I'm not sure we want to be that exact right now, but keeping this on the radar.
Right, but we're taking it out of this document. We're coming back to it in the context of developing a kind of scorecard for measurements of success when we look at that in the spring. And in the meantime, we would ask SEJC on this measure, and we would ask the Climate Action Committee on the EBCE measure what they would consider success under the circumstances. Is that kind of the way
I'm lost in
Looking
some
for-
of the details, but I think staff probably has the idea of the direction.
Okay, but we're striking this language in gray, I believe.
Sorry, which language? Oh, that's because that was the B, number B, that's because the policy was adopted. That's why we're
Yes.
striking the gray, yeah.
And I just keep them on there in gray, so you can see that there have been things accomplished, so they hang on.
Okay, update the disaster preparedness plan is the new language. Is everyone comfortable with the proposed new language? Okay, there are no changes proposed for the continue to promote community-wide inclusivity. Oh, there is a change, pardon me. It's in number 3, identify service needs to support aging in place as an addition, with the SEJC being the advisory body, and therefore I think probably being part of that body's work plan. Any comments on this one? Okay. Promote health and wellness, there are no changes suggested. Create parks. The transition plan for the bulb, I would suggest a change to this rather than we don't have a transition plan. We do have a study, and I would suggest make a plan, prepare a plan for minor improvements. I don't know about minor. Prepare a plan for improvements to park facilities at the bulb.
This is in
What-
addition
Where-
to number 2, complete improvements or?
Well, what we've run into is that there are improvements that the East Bay Regional Park District would like that involve the construction of paths and staircases and boardwalks that we would not do unless we were going to be sure that we could transfer it to the East Bay Regional Park District. But they can't give us that assurance. And right now, even if they could give us that assurance, it might not be the greatest idea because they don't have the personnel to patrol and make sure that encampments don't return. So we're in kind of a holding pattern. But we did set aside funding, which could be used to make improvements that we all know we want out there and that are consistent with the East Bay Regional Park District's desires. But they are not necessarily the improvements that the East Bay Regional Park District wanted us to do. So we would leave this pretty general. We don't want to be building boardwalks and things that we don't want and may have to maintain.
Well, can I suggest we can bring this back as a tweak too if we're not that happy now because of our quarterly updates that we're going to get about this project.
Okay.
We will be hearing about this soon, right?
All right, very good.
Why did they meet with us?
This one, why don't we strike that, and we will do a new, or just leave it. Let's just leave it, and we'll come back to it as we finalize for the following 2 years in the spring.
Leave it with the addition you just mentioned, or leave that addition out?
I would suggest we make the change that I suggested if nobody has any objections.
Could you repeat your change?
Rather than implement transition plan for bulb to East Shore Parks, it would become implement improvements to the bulb and leave it at that. And we will come back to what exactly those improvements will be.
Yeah, this sounds like a bit of a can of worms that we're not going to, it
Yeah.
would take a much longer discussion, so,
Yeah, exactly. So it's really a placeholder.
okay.
And I would take out 2 and 3. Those are both essentially overtaken by events. All right, Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park. Conduct analysis for turf and grass field and opportunities for enhanced landscaping. I think does anyone have any issues with that? All right, enhancing open space, review measure R, establish annual meeting through the parks, recreation, and natural areas, okay, on the creeks. We talked about that at our last meeting. Investigate potential for open space on Caltrans right-of-way. I think that's great. Identify funding to update the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Wonderful. Create cultural facilities and opportunities. No changes are being proposed. Similar with promoting business vitality and advance economic development and the arts.
Yes, but I do have some comments there because
Sure.
I did make comments at the last meeting. I think that did not get incorporated here for whatever reason. So I would, I'm not sure exactly how to word it, but one high-level item perhaps to continue on with the, one thing would be to continue to implement the Economic Development Master Plan, or whatever it's called, that we did. And the other one might be something along the lines of continue to look for innovative ways to promote economic development in the city, something like that. So I might suggest 2 items, and we can come back to that. I have a bunch of detailed ideas around that, but at a high level, I think we should at least have something here, rather than, otherwise it will completely, the economic development part completely disappears.
Yeah, and I'd like to, another one that I had mentioned was improving the maintenance of our business districts. What do we do about the news racks and graffiti and signage and all the small things that can give an area a feeling of neglect? Again, things to come back to in the spring. Updating the arts master plan policies, that looks good. Facilitating government accountability. This one is near and dear to my heart, and I would like to add a placeholder for 2 things: improving financial communication, creating, first and foremost, we get the CAFRs, but beyond that, that we have information available to the residents in easily comprehensible format about the city's finances. And then develop appropriate staffing. We do need to talk about, that was my other, I said 2, and that it really falls under this, which is the transition plan for the treasurer. It's administer transition of treasurer duties to finance department and establish financial advisory committee. I think that probably covers that. Appropriate marijuana.
Before you go any further, on 5.3, well, I wrote down D1, but I'm not sure. There was a comment about increasing our collection of business licenses on the rental properties. It seems like that's getting picked up a little bit now with all of the information that's going out to the property owners, but we might want to add that somewhere in here, and I thought I had a place for it.
I would see that.
I'm sorry. It's further down. I'm sorry.
I would see that as being part of the Budget and Finance Committee work plan making sure that all of the fees that are due to the city are in fact collected. And that would be part of the transition from the city treasurer to the finance.
I think I tucked it in at 5.3D1 where it talks about updates to UUT, transfer tax, so on and so on and so on, tucking it into there.
Yeah.
And what was the wording?
Emphasis on collecting business licenses on all businesses, including rental properties. I think you could probably make it a little more succinct.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm going to skip for a moment to 5.5, long-range budgeting, because that was another that was near and dear to my heart, and I like that very much, if nobody has any objection. And then 5.4, it looks like there is an appetite to make campaign finance limits mandatory. And I'm going to suggest that we put that over to the spring. Is this one of your suggestions or no?
I think that might have been my suggestion.
Was that
Not
your
sure.
suggestion? Okay. Are you comfortable with putting that over to the spring?
Leaving it as is in the staff report and re-reviewing it in the spring, you mean?
Yeah, I don't want to, I don't want our strategic plan to indicate we have made a decision even tentatively to do this.
Well, it says consider.
It says
Language is consider.
What I'm looking at is implement. 5.4, implement campaign finance limits for city elections.
Yes, and it says, well, okay, I see that, but under A
And the next one, it says consider mandatory campaign finance limits.
Well, even if we left that, it would certainly be a council discussion at some point. So
I'm willing to consider it, but I just don't want it to look like we've made any kind of decision.
I don't think so.
Okay, then let's, instead of implement, because we have implemented campaign finance limits, they're just voluntary. How about if we change implement to revisit campaign finance limits for city elections? Okay. And I think that we are done.
Okay, time to start the meeting.
Wow.
Okay, but maybe we could have a 5-minute break, Mayor, for...
Yes, we will take a 5-minute break. Thank you. And we'll can start the meeting at 35 minutes after the hour.
Hey, thanks.
There's another one that's supposed to be coming. This one is more bio.
Okay. Oh. Well, get well before Thursday. Get well before Thursday.
Are you going on?
Going to.
Oh, it should be
Ah, the famous Lois Brown. What I'm still embarrassed over.
It's a little confusing. Usually,
How are you?
I'm not really set up to facilitate, but trying to do it. I guess we got to wait for Nicole. It's okay.
Yeah. All right, let's just push on through here.
Isabel, can you get Nicole? We need to restart. Please come in and take a seat. I would like to call to order. I'd like to call to order the regular Albany City Council meeting of January 22nd, 2018. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Barnes? I'm sorry, he's absent.
He's excused.
He's excused. Councilmember Moss?
Here.
Councilmember Pilch?
Present.
Vice Mayor McQuay? Here. Mayor Nason?
Here. I am too. All right. Tonight we have no ceremonial matters, nor have we had any closed session. We had a work session, but nothing closed, so there is nothing to report. The consent calendar is next. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a member of the audience requests removal of the items from the consent calendar. Does any council member wish to pull an item?
5.6 and 5.10.
Any others? Okay.
I'd also like to pull item 513, please.
5.6, 5.10, and 5.13. Then let's go with item 5.6. Can we have a staff report, please?
Actually, I have a relatively brief question. Perhaps I could just ask my question and save a little time.
Sure.
You know, and I think we mentioned this before, that we get a lot of comments about the condition of our pavement. And I'm just kind of wondering the best way for us to communicate to our community members what we're doing with paving over the coming years, months, years, and how we could convey to them like the schedule. So, you know, what we sort of hear is, you know, you don't do anything, and I drive around town and you're paving every street that I want to drive on. So, you know, how do we best communicate that?
So I think the best way to communicate that is that we give them a total from the capital improvement program that gives them a 5-year target, and we can provide those, staff can provide those to the council. I don't have them at my fingertips. And then remind them that it is going to be a combination of rehabilitation work, which is just tearing up one street at a time, and then also resurfacing streets on a more of a maintenance schedule. So I think both of those together give people assurance that over a 5- and 10-year period, we have a plan to take it from, say, the bottom third into the maybe middle third or top of the PCI scale for the county.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. The staff report says that our PCI condition for 2017 was 54. And the 3-year, our last 3-year rolling average was 59, I think. So we are going to see, I'm concerned we're going to see the PCI drop further. The 3-year rolling average is going to drop next year because 2017 was so low.
So there's a couple things that are going to be happening. This year we're going to be doing another PTAP report. So we're going to be going out and actually doing field measurements to more precisely measure the conditions, the exact conditions. And then second, some of the streets that we're doing now have not been identified in that condition assessment yet. So we have parts of Evelyn Avenue, which we've improved, and then parts of the streets that actually East Bay Mud is resurfacing because of their pipeline work are actually going to gain some of the indications back for us. So I share your concern that it could dip further, but we do have, again, a 5- and 10-year plan to reinvest in the streets. So I think we'll see that rolling average moving up rather than perhaps flat for a while, but moving up in the future.
Okay, and you know, a related concern, of course, is the lighting. I know that we have a study in the capital improvement plan, but I don't think we have the implementation of the recommendations, and that could be another burden on our capital budget that we need to anticipate, right?
Yes, that's correct. So this year, we are going to have an update to the CIP. We'll deliver that to council in March, where we'll be able to bring up to speed all the things in the capital budget, including whatever funding shortfalls we have. But the lighting plan specifically will have findings coming out of that report, coming out of that plan to demonstrate just how much of an investment that will be over a 4- or 5-year period.
Okay, and we cross that bridge when we come to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I keep going?
All right. Let's see. 5.
I have a public comment on 5-6.
Oh, a comment on 5-6. Okay, let's have that.
Thank you, council. Thank you, staff, for putting together the pavement management and striping and signage project. I noticed from the map that there are 2 of the bike routes that are proposed to have just 2 blocks of striping and signage as a part of this project, Talbot and Santa Fe. And I guess I'm a little confused. A 2-block bike route isn't really that helpful and might be actually confusing to people. So I would ask that the council request a change order to include the entirety of those bike routes, unless staff says there's some, real reason not to include striping and signing the entirety of those bike routes. Also, the Jackson bike route striping is shown to end at Solano, but that bike route actually goes to the Albany Children's Center as planned in the active transportation plan, and that is quite a destination. We've actually been requested as Albany Strollers and Rollers to try to put another bike rack in there because there are so many families that are biking there. So it'd be useful to actually have that also extended to 2 blocks so it is implemented in complete as shown in the active transportation plan. Thank you.
Could I ask you to address the issues raised?
Yes, staff will look into both of those issues.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, 510. May we have, oh.
Well, again, I just have a question, I think. 510 on page 45L, we're talking about emails and retention of emails sent to the council. And it has, I think I would consider a new wrinkle in this, that council members must include a copy to councilresponse@albanyca.org. Council members and/or a member of the public may request email records at any time as a matter of public record. Craig, perhaps you can help me understand why that isn't a violation of the Brown Act if we're looking at each other's responses?
I think there is a concern there. If the council members are CCing the rest of the council on their responses, then that would be, I think, likely to be categorized as a serial meeting violation. In the situation where the responses are kept on file, they are public records. So there's a bit of a tension between the Public Records Act and the Brown Act there because given that they're public records, the council has equal access to those documents as any member of the public. So, I mean, I guess there could be an argument that if a majority read the responses that are on file, that could be characterized as a serial meeting. But I think there's not really any way to resolve that issue without trying to restrict the ability of council members to respond to their constituents, which I think is not a mandate of the Brown Act. So that's a bit of a confusing answer, but that's sort of where the law is. It's a bit of a gray area.
Technology has outrun the Brown Act. It's a little difficult, but I think we're right to prioritize transparency.
Okay, that's it for me.
Okay, 5:13. We have a comment.
And Mayor, I'm not sure we asked the public if they wanted to pull any particular items. We can get back to that.
Yeah, it's in the little spiel, but I didn't.
I think she asked, if I remember correctly.
I'll ask again just in case.
Yeah. So hopefully I have the right item. This is the one about the city council items, or the city council procedural changes. I just have two comments. One, I just wanted to thank you for the part about the Pledge of Allegiance. For the last 4 years I've participated in these meetings, I've been silent over those few words because I think it's not appropriate in this city and given the separation of church and state in the Constitution. On the item about the work plans on committees and commissions, I think I understand what you're trying to do, and I would applaud that. What I think the objective is you're trying to get the commissions and committees to realize they're there, the tasks there are given by the city council, not the other way around. On the other hand, I think having a hard, fast rule that's a one-size-fits-all for all the committees and commissions, I think some of the commissions is going to be different. And I think my experience has been people come to these meetings viewing them as kind of satellites of the city council, and so there ought to be a clear process that if a member of the public, thinks that committee should be addressing something, maybe something like, we'll refer this to the city council or something. So at least we're, having the impression we're interested in their problem. We're not, blowing smoke up. That there's something like that, and that there may be situations where the situation on the ground changes rapidly. But on the other hand, coming back to my experience particularly with the Social and Economic Justice Commission, it was always like, well, what's the issue of the week that we're going to try to put on the work plan? And I think the other area in there is the emails that get passed around. Like a member of the committee will ask the staff liaison to forward an email to the other members about something that's not on our work plan. And typically the staff liaison will, what are they supposed to do? If they say no, then, they're kind of obstructing progress. On the other hand, maybe they're facilitating a Brown Act violation, who knows? So anyway, so that's my suggestion is you might want to rethink this a little bit, not have such a hard, fast rule. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this one? Okay, then we'll go to 5.13.
Yes, I'd like to introduce our recreation coordinator and our program manager, Eva Phelan and Alana Rose.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Eva Phelan. I'm the Senior Recreation Supervisor at the Recreation and Community Services Department. We're excited to be here tonight to tell you a little bit more about the Recreation Program's Youth Scholarship Program. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Alana Rose, who is one of our fabulous coordinators at the Recreation Department. So.
Hello, thank you for having me, Mayor Nason and council members. Thank you for this amazing opportunity, and thank you for giving me some of your time here tonight. We would like to recognize and express our sincerest appreciation and gratitude to the Zari family for their donation of $1,000 in memory of their father to our Recreation Youth Programs Scholarship Fund. Without this, it would be nearly impossible to start issuing out scholarship awards to families this year. Mr. Zari was a longtime Albany business owner of over 30 years. The shop is still there. And some of his friendly and caring vibes are still there as well, if you ever go in there. Because of this donation, we can fulfill one of our core values of providing quality services to all Albany residents, regardless of economic standing, which I think is really important and what we really need here today. Because without this, these families won't have access to our programs. And just imagine how many Albany families we can help if we all just went that little extra square mile and maybe donated $1 to this Recreation Programs Youth Scholarship Fund. So, thank you.
And we have one more thing.
Yes, we do have one more thing. We do have one more thing. We do have a sweet little surprise goodie bag for the Zari family. Hi, thank you.
They're all here. We have 5 of the 6 brothers and sisters here tonight. Yeah. So we just want to publicly acknowledge their donation and thank them very much. So if you guys want to come on up. Oh, maybe we'll just stand in the middle here.
This is, I grew up in Albany, and I'm going to want to send a copy of this picture to my brother. We, although it's very difficult for me to acknowledge that this gentleman had a first name because he was and always will be Mr. Zari to us, so thank you.
I just don't want you guys to be in the background. Okay. On 3, say sandwiches.
Thank you so much. Oh, how lovely.
Richest man in town. We get so many friends.
Yes, yes. It was always good. Thank you.
It's always good.
So I just have to say thank you for the honor. Allowing us to do this because my father would actually.
Please.
Sorry, I don't want to take your time, but I just want to thank you all for the opportunity of actually doing this. Our dad, Joe, would be honored and touched, and he'd be the most kind of unassuming individual here. So to do this in his honor is just, it's a great honor for all of us. So thank you very much, and we're happy to give the donation.
Thank you so much. Okay, just to be sure, is there anyone in the audience among the residents and friends in attendance who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar that has not been pulled? Okay, then I will accept a motion.
I move the consent calendar.
Second.
Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch.
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid,
Yes.
Mayor Nason.
Yes. Okay, it's time for Good of the City. Good of the City is a time for persons desiring to address the City Council on an item that is not on the agenda. Please note that city policy limits each speaker to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda. Do we have speaker cards?
Yes. I have two, Ed Field and Brian Beal.
Hello, Ed Fields again. Last month, you approved the expenditure of $452,000 for Cotonesis Creek maintenance. There was no maintenance plan presented. The mayor tried to get this item before the Parks and Recreation Committee for more public input and discussion. And Jeff Bond agreed that it could be done. But the council decided to go ahead and vote the funds. What kind of transparency will there be? Our charter city is exempt from state contracting rules, and expenditures up to $100,000 can be made without going to the council first. And we don't consider consultants' contracts the same as public works contracts. So the public and the council might only see the expenditures to approve the funds once they have been spent. Look at the public discussion and input into the work to be done on Albany Hill to remove trees or make improvements. Why not for Cotonesis Creek? We want to give Susan Schwartz and Friends of Five Creeks, with their extensive knowledge and expertise, a chance to have input into how this maintenance is carried out. The way to do that is to give the public, as well as the council, a chance to have input into how the work is done. The council also had a chance to give the Arts Committee and the Sustainability Committee more input into how their committees will function in the future, but it didn't. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Beal, and it's first time addressing Mayor Nason and Vice Mayor Peggy McQuaid. Once again, congratulations on your reelection. I have kind of a fun item for you tonight, which is these cards. So it occurred to me a couple days ago, I'd noticed the kiosk out in front. Maybe it's time that in the interests of the environment and so forth, that the council or staff looks into maybe an electronic system where members of the audience could just type in the card, maybe at the kiosk in front, and then have them come to our clerk here, and then we could save some paper. You know, still maybe make the paper optional, but that's kind of my idea of the year, that we have a lot of these little papers that sometimes I fill them out and never actually use them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi there, Council. My name is Alan Kane, and with the Solano Avenue Association, I want to share with you some exciting news. And that is on Sunday, February the 10th. Sunday, February the 10th is our 12th annual Lunar New Year event. And what happens with this, for the new council that may not be aware of the logistics behind this, is after the last showing of the last film at the Albany Twin Theater, myself and a team of 5 people go in and set up a stage, lights, and a full audio system for performances that begin at 10 a.m. It is a sleepless night. Sometimes when they have the Rocky Horror Picture Show, we can't start setting up for our Lunar New Year event until 2 or 3 in the morning, which actually puts us under pressure for that 10 a.m. deadline. By the time we evacuate that theater for the movie, the first showing of that day at noon, the theater is spotless. It's something we're very proud of. It's on Sunday the 10th. It's from 10 to noon, and we'll be sending you invitations to it as well. It is yet again another free event that the Solano Avenue Association provides to the community. The theater seats 475, and we fill it every year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, okay. Good evening, I'm Carol Fitzgerald, and I want to piggyback on Mr. Field's comment mentioning the Cordnesis Creek, but I want to refer to the Park and Rec presentation that was done in December on the work that has been done in the last year on Albany Hill. And as we complete Measure R funds and we go into Measure M, I want to know what's going on. I happen to have been involved with work on Albany Hill for 20 years, and to have my name even mentioned in the presentation with no input, never having seen it, no notice that that presentation was done to the Park and Rec, is not going to go down well with me or the Friends of Albany Hill. So I want to know when these presentations go on and when the work that's being done on Albany Hill, vegetation, I want to know in advance. And we've had wonderful experience with Public Works, but with the vegetation manager, that is not the case. And so I'd like that to be remedied. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other good of the city? Okay, then we are moving to council member reports on meetings attended and announcements of future meetings. Why don't we start with Council Member Pilch? Are you?
Sure. Yeah, two meetings to report about. One is the East Bay Community Energy meeting. Where we did see presentations of the opt-outs as well as the opt-ups for the various cities. And I don't have that in front of me, but I can summarize that the opt-outs are very low. They were I think the budgets accounted for up to 5%, and they remain around 2% for most cities for the opt-outs, so that's great. The opt-ups remain also, though, very modest in the, I think, I'm not even sure I should give a percentage, but it's pretty modest range. It should be noted that both Hayward and Albany had their customers enroll in the Brilliant 100. And the Piedmont, by default, enrolled their residents, their ratepayers in Renewable 100. But both Hayward and Piedmont put their residents who were part of the PG&E Care program into the next level down by default, rather than Albany, where we left them in Brilliant 100. Anyway, so we had a presentation about the financials. Financials are healthy. Rate setting is a bit screwy this year. Normally, rate setting would happen around January 1st of the year by PG&E because of the PCIA, which we've discussed before, power charge indifference adjustment, and the appeals of that. We don't expect rates to be set by PG&E until March, and so the CCAs are also holding off until March to the CCAs won't know also until March what the new rates are and how to respond to that. We expect, because of the appeals of the PCIA, for there to be a change in the ruling on the PCIA, but we haven't seen anything yet, as far as I know. And as you can imagine, the PG&E probable bankruptcy is on the minds of everyone on the board as well as the staff, and they are working behind the scenes on that. And it was discussed in the meeting as well that the staff has not come to the cities very often, or maybe not at all, to write letters And one of the council members, a council member from Hayward, I believe, spoke up and encouraged the staff to use the city's as appropriate as needed if they need some letter writing power or other, resolutions passed, that sort of thing. And I think that does it for the EBCE meeting. I also went to the League of California Cities Policy Committee meetings, and I think you were there, Mayor, as well, or at least I saw you roaming about the hallways.
I was there for a portion of the discussion.
Okay, yeah. So I was I'm part of the Environmental Quality Policy Committee. We, in the first meeting of the year, usually not a lot happens. We set kind of a work plan or goals for the year. We did bring air quality. I did bring air quality to that committee as a concern, and that committee ended up setting 4 goals, and unfortunately I did not write them down, and they haven't been sent to me yet. But I know that I think I know 3 of them. One is water. One is wastewater, which we don't not really an issue for our city. The other one is recycling. The recycling markets, the loss of recycling markets from. Loss of recycling market in China, and that was brought up by a number of cities. And then a number of cities also brought up the CCAs and the what some would call the attacks on CCAs, and how cities need to be shielded from issues from those who wanting to from things that might affect the CCAs. We also have it's a great meeting because we also get a overview of all kinds of issues, and just very briefly at high level, California budget is in great shape, but it was also noted that a recession might be coming. Jerry Bound said something about this before he left office. Median incomes have come back, but inflation-adjusted incomes are actually behind, so there is a widening economic gap in California, and I assume elsewhere as well. That was noted. And of course, housing was a huge issue in general in those meetings. Oh, one more thing I'll say, that we did get a presentation from the Institute of Local Government, who has programs to help with climate action in cities, and I've spoken with staff a little bit about those programs, and I urge you to check out the California Department of Conservation. They also did a presentation, and they have a website on which they have quite a number of maps of all sorts of things: geological maps, maps of weather, maps of I can't remember off the top of my head, but fascinating place to spend a little bit of time, California Department of Conservation, and I think that's it for meetings. I may have missed one. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor McQuaid.
Okay, I was fortunate enough to attend the Songs on Solano before the holidays, which was presented by the Recreation Department, and as usual, it was an absolutely charming event with amazing s'mores that were, I guess they were good. They were sure sticky. And lots of families, lots of kids just having a wonderful time. I went with the mayor to attend the mayor's conference. We had a United Against Hate sort of wrap up and start preparing for next year. As part of the League of California Cities, Council Member Pilch and I met with Assembly Member Buffy Wicks. Had a little time to chat with her and sort of introduce ourselves a little more. I attended the art opening for the new show at the community center. With the mayor, I went to the 2x2x2. I hosted our community leaders quarterly meeting with regional electeds. We had another meeting on Al debates. I attended the climate action workshop here last Wednesday, which was a full house and very, very well done. And I also attended league policy committees. There's a written summary on the dais for council. I'm fortunate enough to sit on 2 committees this year: public safety and community services. And we are looking forward to a busy, busy year.
Thank you. Councilmember Maas.
I only have one meeting to report on. For this month, I attended the Housing Authority of the County of Alameda. Not much of a meeting. The main topic was bloodborne pathogen exposure control plan for the workers. But the takeaway, which I found interesting, was the information that the voucher program for housing vouchers is funded through February. But if the shutdown does not end, people getting vouchers will be out of luck by the end of February for rent. So what's going on in Washington does affect us, or it can affect us in big ways.
Very disturbing.
Yeah.
Okay, I attended quite a few meetings, so some of which have already been mentioned, so I'll run through it very quickly. Vice Mayor McQuaid and I had the delightful opportunity to take a tour of the Tesla factory, which was fascinating and inspiring. It's exciting that they're producing less expensive electrical vehicles than in the past, and it's there's a great future to look for. I attended a Friends of Five Creeks event that I think was notable. It was a presentation by the naturalist for the East Bay Regional Park District, and was extremely well attended and well received. With Vice Mayor McQuaid, I think she mentioned that we attended the Mayor's Conference, and I've been appointed by the Mayor's Conference to represent it at the on the East Bay Regional Park District's Park Advisory Commission, which I hope to be able to improve communications between local government and the Park District. I attended a programs meeting of the Stop Waste Authority, which was very interesting, and I'm going to post, I'll make sure that we get on our website some of this information, because it was largely regarding grant programs, and given our very creative and environmentally oriented and excited community, I think that they're wonderful ideas for people to look at and maybe come up with additional grant fundable ideas of their own. I attended the kickoff for the Richmond Ferry, which is a great new transportation asset for us, and an ACTC committee meeting, which was primarily about the Port of Oakland, but was fascinating and very important to our local economy. As Vice Mayor McQuaid mentioned, we attended the community leaders meeting and the 2x2 and the 2x2x2. We had one meeting with the school district and one that included the UC Village. I went for a 3-day conference of the new mayors and new council members conference of the League of California Cities. And I will make reports in writing for those who are interested, and try to get that onto our website soon. All right, let's see. We have city manager report.
I'd like to welcome our new senior recreation supervisor, Heather Posner. She is primarily in our child care facility and doing a fantastic job. We welcome her. The next Albany CERT meeting, the community disaster preparedness, 2 things actually on disaster preparedness. One is a shelter management class that will be held February 23rd from 9 to 5. Food is provided. This is at the senior center, and the intent of the class is really for those interested in rolling up their sleeves and learning about managing shelters if and when we have when we have a disaster. So the next CERT, Community Emergency Response Team community meeting, this is kind of an offshoot of CERT, will be on January 30th from 7 to 8:30. The focus of this meeting will be a presentation by Suzanne Frew on increasing the resilience and sustainability of diverse communities. We've also had some very well-received presentations from our police department to local community groups, one of which was Belmont Village, on senior fraud prevention, and that was very well attended. If anyone in our community, any type of organization, business, or neighborhood is interested, they can contact our neighborhood services coordinator, Sid Schoenfeld, for more information, and his contact information is on our website. A couple of updates from our Public Works Department. Our sewer rehab project, the contractor is currently working to wrap up their activities on Tevlin and Ordway. That should be completed by the end of next week. The contractor will move on to Curtis and Ventura. We've done some really helpful noticing to the community. It's been in the school eateries as well for those that drop off at Marin, so folks are aware, and accommodations have been made to help work with the life balance that occurs in that area, and the work will start a little bit later to help facilitate drop-off and pickup of students. I really appreciate our Public Works Department for seeing that through. Also, in terms of urban forestry, we have a lot of liquid ambers in our commercial sector, and something that, and throughout major arterials in town, something that our urban forester has tried to do proactively is do a really applied pruning to these trees, and it's actually helped with these last storms. We haven't seen as many failures, so that's an excellent thing, always. And again, a thank you to those that attended the Climate Action and Adaptation Workshop this past Wednesday. It was a great turnout. In terms of next steps, there will be some stakeholder meetings in February, and of course, engage with our Climate Action Committee for ongoing updates on that process. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're ready to move into presentations. 8-1, CIP number 41009, Albany Hill access improvements. May we have a staff report?
I'll start. Okay. Thank you, Council. I'm going to give you a brief update on the project, and then I'm going to hand the podium over to Dr. Weiss for a Monarch presentation. So my comments are pretty short, and at the end we'll ask for the adoption of the resolution. So the project timeline, the commission the Parks and Rec Commission was presented this project at a 10% design phase. Prior to that, the last time you guys saw this was actually at the pre-design phase, and you got some conceptual drawings. I'll remind you of what those look like. Many of the features that we've seen in the conceptual drawings are now in the project design. But we went 4 times to the Parks and Recreation Commission, and in between there, Dr. Weiss provided a presentation which was well received in June. And we also did a conference call with Dr. Weiss on a few different issues. So it's been a fairly thoroughly vetted and discussed project, so we're really proud of where it is now. Oops. So some of the pre-design concept you saw about a year ago. This is the Taft turnaround, so some of the features, I don't need to go through all of them, but we're going to have a new sidewalk, we're going to have ADA parking and a crosswalk. We'll have some features there, including some seating, some trees that we're going to be pulling down. The eucalyptus logs will be reused and used as barriers, and some new steps. So this is a feature that we're doing as an entry place in Taft. You'll also see that we're doing it at Jackson and at Madison. And then along with that is a lot of the work that we did was on the ADA path from Taft up to the summit. So this is another rendition of what it will look like on Taft. You can see the crosswalk, you can see the steps. There's going to be some new signage, and then the ADA route, which will wind through the west side of the fire road. This is the Jackson concept. We'll have some kind of a landing area for people when they arrive at Jackson. They don't have to be on the pavement. They can actually be in a little area where they can kind of get ready and then go on a hike. But what you'll see is on the north side of Taft, many of the trails are already in place, so we're simply going to clean those up. We've got a few tree removals of trees that are overhanging and look like they're already in jeopardy of falling. They're kind of leaners, so we'll remove some of those. We'll open up the canopy a little bit, but for the most part, the work is primarily south of the Taft turnaround towards the summit. The work in the north area is going to be primarily essentially restoring and improving the existing trail system, putting in some new steps. Dr. Weiss did a monarch butterfly habitat study for us. We asked him to assess and describe for us the existing monarch habitat on Albany Hill, so he'll talk about that. And then we also asked him to evaluate the specific design drawings that we gave him. So at the 90% level, we essentially provided him those drawings and asked for his assessment. So he can talk about that as well. So let me give you a little bit of Dr. Weiss's background so you have an idea of where he's coming from. Dr. Weiss founded Creekside Science in 2006. So he's a leader in California and on the West Coast on monarch habitat research, preservation, and rehabilitation. He's been published in multiple journals, publications, including ecology and conservation biology. I'm just going to read a couple of the titles. I don't claim to understand everything that I'm reading here. Forest canopy structure at overwintering monarch butterfly sites, measurements with hemispherical photography. Also thermal overwintering monarch butterfly sites, and restoration of rare butterfly habitats. He's done critical field work in habitat restoration and species reintroduction, including the checker spot butterfly, on San Bruno Mountain. He's authored several reports along with him and also his staff, including recommendations for restoration of monarch butterfly wintering habitat at Gibbs Park and Huntington Beach. So it's a similar habitat as we have on Albany Hill. So again, I gave you an idea of what we tasked Dr. Weiss with doing, which was to give us an idea of what Albany Hill, what we have as a resource in Albany Hill, and then also specifically to talk about his work, to talk about the project and its impacts. So I'm going to load up Dr. Weiss's presentation, and then we'll go from there. Get a chance to do it.
Let's have a little interlude here.
Yeah.
Albany, here we go.
Thank you.
Oops. Okay. Yeah, thanks, everybody. It's been a real pleasure to get to know Albany Hill among about a dozen monarch sites I've worked at in California since 1990 is when I first encountered monarchs. So, yeah, just dive into the presentation. So there's Thanksgiving counts of the monarchs on Albany Hill. Bill Shepard and other enthusiasts have gone out and counted them every year. There's this kind of standardized period in mid to late November. That's like the monarchs have coalesced in the sites. So we just look at the record here. Back in the late 90s, there were about 3,000 monarchs up there, and then they kind of disappeared. There were several years, the blank spots are where nobody did counts. And then in the mid, 20-teens, we've had, about 1,000 monarchs there. And of course, this year is kind of the monarch crash across all of California. Population overall is down by a factor of almost 10. And I could spend a lot of time telling you what my hypotheses are for that. But a lot of it had to do with the wild swings in weather we had last winter. We had a warm February. The monarch said, oh, it's springtime, we're going to leave. And then, if you remember, the weather really closed in. It got cold in late February, and then March was very cool and rainy, and there was even snow down to very low levels. So they really got nailed by that. But they were also starting from a somewhat diminished overall population. But Albany Hill is a significant overwintering site, so as people have latched onto it, it's an important site to make sure that it continues to maintain the monarchs. So the first thing to do is figure out, how does the site work? So monarchs want several things in their overwintering sites. They want a place that rarely freezes, and being next to a large body of water like San Francisco Bay or the Pacific Ocean is a really important preventer for preventing freezes. But they also want a forest structure that provides a lot of wind shelter, but at the same time lets in enough light for them to bask in the sun when they want to, or areas of dappled light, or even some areas of deep shade. But you need that mix in the habitat. So based on site visits and kind of interviews with people who've been monitoring the monarchs out there, the typical cycle is they show up in October and November, and they really hang out up on the ridgetop. So I have the ridgetop here circled. And it's bright, it's sunny, but it's also pretty exposed to the wind when we get the first storms in the season. So we get southerly winds, and monarchs don't like wind. So they duck down onto the southwest slope. And in the southwest slope, the forest has a pretty complex structure with some gaps, some openings that let in light but are pretty well wind sheltered. And then some kind of, real kind of rugged trees and gaps. So in that area on the southwest slope, there's a lot of little nooks and crannies where the monarchs can make their way in. So all of those little dots are places where I took a hemispherical canopy photo, which comes up with an image like this. So what this is, it's a fisheye lens. It gives you a full 180-degree field of view. So around the edges there, you're basically seeing the horizon. And then, of course, directly in the middle of the photo is the zenith directly overhead. And what this lets us do is look at the geometry of the forest canopy. So we superimposed these grids on it. The first grid on the left here is a real, just looking at how open the sky is in different directions and at different elevation angles. And then on the right, we can superimpose on the path of the sun in the image because we know which way north is. So we can quantify, based on the forest canopy structure, how exposed the wind you are and how much light you're getting. So we can work our way through the site and take photographs in places where monarchs are, where monarchs aren't, and get a sense of what is it they're looking for in the site. So here are 4 sites up along the ridge top. First thing, south is at the bottom of the photograph, north is at the top. East is on the left and west is on the right, and it's opposite that you have on a map because we're looking up rather than down. So I don't want to twist your brains around too much there, but it's just, that's the way we're, but the key thing on the ridge top here is you're getting a lot of light. There's a lot of open sky to the south where the sun paths are. Monarchs really like that until the wind comes up. And the wind comes up out of the south when we get our first storms. So they tend to leave these sites. You'll notice in the upper right one, you can see the infamous cross. Just give you a sense of where you are on that one. Here's what it looks like when we get into where they actually cluster. See, it's a lot more closed off around the edges, so it's very sheltered from the wind. But there's a lot of dappled light coming through the forest canopy, and the monarchs really like that. In the lower right is a site where it's really, really dependent on a single tree that's providing the wind shelter from the south and southwest winds, which are very important. We get strong winds from those directions during winter storms. So we can work our way through the site. And what we're looking at here is this is how open the overall canopy is. All the white dots up along the summit are very open. You're seeing a lot of sky, and then when we get down into the southwest slope where they cluster after they've left the ridge top, you see it's a lot less open sky, it's a lot more sheltered. And then it actually gets quite dark as we go north towards the Taft Circle there. Forest is quite dense there. And I'm going to skip the next one. All of this is in the report. If you want to know this in gruesome detail, it's all written in our report. This is showing what the light environment is like. So the light dots are where we're getting a lot of sunshine in November or February, or December and January. We do this by months. And you can see how well lit the sites along the ridgetop are, and that the monarch sites are showing up here as the little orange, they're supposed to look like butterflies in there, but they don't show up nearly as well as they should. They're basically moving from well-lit, wind-exposed sites to moderately lit, wind-sheltered sites down on the south slope. Now, if the conditions get really good, mild January, December, January, they'll move back up to the top of the hill. But then when the winds kick up, they're going to dive down. One of the issues that we're not really dealing with here, but the parcel on which they actually spend most of their time is not owned by the city, and there's definitely some potential for some conflict depending on what the development plans are there, but that's beyond the scope of this. Now, the wind is what's really driving them around. So what I've done is I've circled the sites where they like to spend their time after the winter is really closed in. And you can see the direction of the arrows, the wind direction. So this upper left is wind from the southwest. You see the arrows are pointed that way. And the larger the arrow is, the more exposed you are. And you can see that the arrows tend to be rather small, especially down on the southern part of inside that circle. So it's very well wind sheltered. South wind, again, we're very well wind sheltered. Southeast winds tend to be the strongest and is very well wind sheltered from the southeast because of the hill itself. And then we have east winds, northeast, north. The north and the northwest winds are really important directions because we often get very strong northwest and north winds. I think today we actually had some pretty strong north winds early in the day. And then we get the west wind coming kind of right through the Golden Gate there, and it's pretty well sheltered from that. So it's providing a lot of wind shelter, and that's why the monarchs are down there off of the ridge top. Here's looking from above, this is a Google Earth image, and you can sort of see how the monarch sites, which are circled in yellow, are kind of in these gaps in the forest. So we're getting some light in there. And then I circled what I call the VIT, the very important tree. That's the tree that was in that one photograph. That's really providing the wind shelter for those two sites just to the north of it. So we have a good understanding of how the site works. They kind of do the same routine every year. Of course, this year it was really hard to figure out their routine because there were so few of them. It's kind of and they're also really can be hard to find in that forest. In case you haven't noticed, there's a very thick understory of poison oak, so it's really hard to get around in there. So I was given the plans, as Robert said, and we had a couple rounds of consultation. The first consultation out in the field was very much like, just minimize the amount of trees that you take out, and especially the farther south we get on the hill, because that's where you're starting to get into where the along the ridgetop, where the monarchs like to cluster. They're not known from the area, from the Taft Circle down a couple of hundred yards. So they came back with these plans, and the tree removals are all up towards Taft. And there's actually only one tree that's getting taken out that was even close to where the monarchs like to cluster. So we were basically able to say it's not going to have a big effect on the monarchs. It's north of where they like to be, so it's not going to affect the light environment. There's plenty of trees left to provide the wind shelter from the northerly directions. So we were able to make a pretty strong determination that the plans as drawn here are not going to have a big effect, or not going to have any effect on the monarch as far as we can have, because the main action is south of here. So we can kind of see it here. The red areas where the tree removals are, and the monarch sites show up a little bit better here with the yellow circles that are all south and southwest of where the trees are. So that's my presentation. Be willing to answer any questions. There's two written reports. So it is written down, which that's my job, try to make it as transparent as possible. So thank you.
Questions from the council?
I'd have a quick one. You say you study other sites. How significant is Albany Hill in the number of sites that you look at? I presume all in California?
Yeah. From Huntington Beach up into Marin. That is actually made a table in the report that showed Albany Hill relative to the other Bay Area sites. And in the Bay Area, it's a really significant site. Ardenwood Regional Park down in Fremont area really is that and then the San Leandro Golf Course are like the two other large sites. So it ranks up in the top sites in the Bay Area. California as a whole, it's, it's a moderate site. It's not moderate size sites. I mean, whenever you get 1,000 monarchs in a site, that's pretty good. And, it's significant because it's here and it's what we have to work with.
So a follow-up question. Your report was kind of cast judgment on which trees were being taken out and if they'd have any damage. Are there things that we could be doing to increase the monarch population, either in tree plantings or?
Yeah, we were thinking of going in that direction a little bit, but because the areas where you would want to do the habitat restoration, which would actually involve cutting some holes in the forest, because a lot of the forest is just too dense and dark for them. But if you create a nice wind-sheltered gap, they'll be pretty good at finding it, using the existing microsites as sort of our model. Those are on that southwest parcel, where the monarchs are, and then also behind the high-rise. So you're kind of getting out of the city jurisdiction and kind of leave that.
Yeah, that was going to be my point, is the trees we're removing are on city property. So to the effect that we can open up canopy on city property. It's a policy issue to go into non-city property and remove somebody else's tree. So we didn't do that in this as part of this project.
Yeah, so, I think there's lots of opportunities around the hill for some little bit of management. Basically opening up the forest in very select spots. I mean, we're talking about taking out a few trees here and there and seeing what happens. But that's a much longer term, and, it's a bigger policy issue with what do you do on other people's properties.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, there we go.
We used to think that it was a specific... Sorry, can you...
Yeah.
We used to think that it was a specific tree that monarchs return to, and it is the case, or at least it has been since I've been observing. But when you do your studies, you're talking about the habitat, aren't you? Not, yeah.
Yeah.
Could you speak to that a little more?
Yeah, you tend to see the monarchs showing up literally on the same trees year after year and in the same sites. And as far as we know, it's more a function of the microclimate conditions there. People have been looking for whether they leave behind a scent that attracts monarchs the next year, but nobody's really found anything along those lines. And it's a very dynamic phenomenon, as they show up and cluster and move around based on the weather. So, the fact that it just happens to be that tree happens to be in the right microsite for them. So it's not the tree per se, but more the surroundings.
Thank you.
Dr. Weiss's presentation had one slide that showed the tree removal plan. So we can see that most of the trees removed in the area are specifically designed to make a path so we can put in the ADA trail, and they are on the other side of the hill where the monarchs tend not to go. So in front of you, we do have a council resolution. So one of the resolutions is approving the project design and the CEQA categorical exemption, and then approving the call to bids. So certainly.
questions from council? I have one question, and maybe it's a question for Craig. Can we adopt a resolution in connection with a presentation without having an agendized public hearing?
The agenda item does reference approval of the resolution, so yes, I think that's properly agendized.
Okay, good.
The council also updated their rules of procedure and order specifically on presentation so that action can be taken.
Okay, good.
Were there any other questions?
No, but I think we've got speaker cards. No? No?
I decided at the last minute. So this just came up in my mind hearing the presentation. It seems there may be a number of trees in places that are not on city property. And we don't have a policy for that. But given the fact that Albany's population is very environmentally conscious, and that I think there might be some process to where we could, I guess, disseminate this information to homeowners in affected areas, that they might voluntarily do something. And that's kind of what I would suggest maybe as a possible future step, if there's a way, because obviously a lot of the habitat is not on city-owned land, and but it'd be nice if we could just not give up there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Okay, then we'll bring it back to council. Comments or additional questions?
I think the design seems pretty straightforward, and from what I can tell by looking at plans on an iPad, it seems well detailed, and I'd be happy to move the item forward.
I just thought of a question, if that's okay.
Yes.
The ADA path, does it go to the top of the hill, or it stops a little bit short of that? Could you remind me how that goes?
Sure. So originally, the ADA path was going to go to what we call the true summit, the precise point. What we found is taking it there would have required an additional tree removal. So we stepped it back just on the north side of the kind of a cluster of 3 eucalyptus. So don't tell anybody, but it's about 10 feet off of the true summit. So it's right there. You're going to get great views.
Great. Have you selected the color and texture and that kind of detail for the pathway?
So we asked Commission one material selection. They made a recommendation, and staff made a recommendation for colored concrete. And we actually suggested that we create 3 samples as part of the construction. First phase of the construction is to have the contractor lay out 3 or 4 different color samples on site, so we could actually bring people onto the site and look at these 3 different samples of colors, so that we can kind of participate in that selection process.
Very good. I just thinking about this and kind of Googling around about it, I came across samples of concrete projects where there were eucalyptus leaves pressed into the concrete to leave a pretty pattern. And I thought it was a nice touch for kind of honoring the forest. It might be worth looking at. Just a thought. Councilmember Pilch?
Just one comment. In the drawings, there's an area called the BMX area. Can I assume that should really be the BMX impacted area, and that's not an area where you want BMX to go? Is that correct?
I think that's a fair assumption. I think that's actually a leftover of the Albany Hill Master Plan might have actually shown that as a identified area, not as a designated area, but an area of known use. So we kept that on there for reference, but we're not planning a lot of work in that area.
Okay, yeah, no, it just struck me that someone could misinterpret that as the area where BMX are encouraged to go.
Yeah, we won't have signage.
Yeah. And it's actually an area where where BMX or mountain bicycle use has caused damage.
One of the comments we did get recently was that we should be thoughtful in our design of the trails so that BMX or other bikers don't start using our improved trails as access points. So we'll be looking at that.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready for a motion?
So moved.
Pardon? Did you get public comment?
We did call for public comment. Nobody's changed their mind? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So second.
Did
Did you move it?
I did.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second?
Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid,
Yes.
Mayor Nason.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, I think that our next item is deferred. We were going to have a presentation from the carbon-free Albany presenter, but the individual is ill, and so that will be deferred to another meeting. So I think we're ready for our quarterly financial update. Oh, wait. We didn't, oh yeah, no, it's okay. Come on up, okay.
All right, so it looks like, looking at the finances, I just did the general fund this time. I'm going to find a different way to present the special revenue funds because I think without a fund balance, it's slightly misleading. It looks like a lot of them are overspent. So we'll work on that one and get it back to you. But with the general fund, the expenses are on track. Overall, we're at 41% when we're 50% of the way through the year. And revenues look to be a little behind, but it's kind of typical for where we are. We haven't gotten all our business license revenue in, and there's, some other things that are, they come later in the year. So I'm not really worried about where we are. Other than that, I guess my staff report talks about business licenses. We are a little late on that. I submitted a request in November to get the form updated, and the company is still working on that update. I am hoping that that will be done this week. I got the second proof today and submitted it back to them with a few spelling issues. And as soon as we get that out, the revenue will come in. It's not technically due until January 31st anyway, but businesses have started coming in to pay. That's it. Any questions?
Okay, any questions from the council? Questions? Okay. I guess I'd make a quick comment because this says the city is in good financial health overall. It's good to hear. I do have some skepticism because I feel like, gee, we have to look at our paving. That's in a way, it's like borrowing money to let, as if pavement goes downhill, because somebody in the future is going to have to pay for that. And we have, pension liabilities and all those kinds of things. I think there's a lot that goes into an evaluation of financial health overall. But it sounds like on these specific metrics, things are fine.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Heather.
I'm here for the next one too, so.
And Back we go to the presentation of the proposed update to the fiscal year 2018 and 19 operating budget. Et cetera. May we have a staff report?
All right, so there were a handful of items that were omitted from the original budget in regards to part-time salaries and in regards to benefits. So we're making those adjustments here. And then there were also a handful of contract changes, specifically street sweeping and janitorial services. Or I'm not sure janitorial services was really a change, just so much as we re-looked at the contract. And so that's what's listed here.
Okay.
Did you have any questions on any
Questions
specific
from the
items?
council? I asked all my questions at a meeting, so I'm satisfied with the answers. All right. More?
That's it.
All right. So we've received the presentation, and we are ready to adopt the resolution. Do I hear a motion?
Would you like public comment?
Sorry, thank you. I'm sorry, is there anyone who wants to make public comment on this item? Seeing none, I would bring it back to council. Comments or a motion?
I'll move Resolution 2019-13, adopting the update to the operating budget for fiscal year 2018-19, and authorizing appropriations.
I'll second.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes.
The motion carries.
And we have another resolution?
We're going to get another presentation, or do we want to just go on with this?
It's just in regards to the 3% cost of living adjustment for unrepresented employees. It's updating the salary table to recognize that.
It's not an increase, it's an adjustment.
Okay.
Numbers.
I'll move resolution number 2019-14.
I'll second.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes.
Mayor Nason?
Yes. All right, we have no public hearings today. We do have unfinished business, which is a presentation, an informational item on the city costs associated with the Solano stroll.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. At your May 21st, 2018 council meeting, you took action to authorize staff to issue an encroachment permit for the stroll. As part of that discussion that evening, you asked for a follow-up report to provide some more details on the detailed information on city staff costs related to supporting the stroll. During the past several years, city staff have been working with the Solano Avenue Association very well to modernize, I would say, our conditions of approval associated with the event. And our focus at the city level is to ensure that we're using the best practices in safety and event management, and to do our best to minimize the impact on nearby residents and businesses. Some of the things that we've updated in the last few years, and we'll continue to work with them, the Solano Avenue Associations on, include updating the vendor booth fire safety requirements and looking at that a little bit more carefully, additional emergency medical staffing, establishing some public safety emergency response routes, north-south routes through the stroll in case there is an emergency elsewhere in the city and our personnel need to get across the stroll, across Solano Avenue. Also placement of safety barriers at selected intersections, improving the handling of compostable and recyclable materials, and safety inspections in the morning of the stroll. Following the 2018 stroll, city staff from each of the major departments that are involved reviewed their staffing levels and overtime costs. And the details of that are in your attachment to the staff report. The primary departments involved are the public safety departments, police and fire, as well as public works, and community development has a relatively modest amount of staff time. Overall, combining all the city staff involved in one way or the other, there are a total of 37 staff people that are involved with the event, either in the planning, the setup, staffing the event itself, or the cleanup. And we're estimating that the total staff hours are approximately 500 hours, again, through all 4 phases of the event. In terms of expenses, there are kind of 2 categories. The first is what we call direct out-of-pocket expenses. These are expenses that if we didn't do the event, we otherwise wouldn't have incurred, and that's primarily staff overtime for the staff positions that are eligible for overtime. And that's approximately $21,500 in direct out-of-pocket expenses. In addition, we do provide $5,000 to the Solano Avenue Association to be an event sponsor. There's also indirect staff time, and that's time that is people who are working their normal work hours. So they would get their salary one way or the other, but they're working on this rather than something else. And depending on how you want to look at this event, would roughly estimate another $15,000 in staff costs associated with that indirect costs. And in terms of the direct out-of-pocket costs, I should note that we absorb that in our normal operating budgets, and we don't attempt to recover that from the event or any of the vendors. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the council?
Yes, I didn't take as close a look as I should have before this meeting. So what I'm trying to determine is in the table, the total sum of $21,500 includes all expenses, including staff time, or that's only staff time?
That is primarily staff overtime and a relatively small amount of out-of-pocket expenses, about $1,500 or so.
And you mentioned other expenses are other expenses not in this table are summarized somewhere else, or
they're not in the table. It was the table is focused on the direct costs, the costs that are incurred as a result of this event.
So can you give me an example of indirect costs then?
So my salary is an example. I get paid one way or the other. I don't get paid overtime. So I attend the event, I spend time there. If I wasn't working on this, I could be working on something else. So if we get a normal, planning application, we attempt to set our fees to recover that hourly rate that myself or other people in our department get paid.
Okay, but it does, we don't have a tally then of the indirect staffing costs. We don't have a tally of those indirect staffing costs then?
We have a tally of the hours. I'm ballparking the dollar amount at about $15,000.
Oh, okay, so 15,000. So the total cost would be the 21,500 plus the 15,000.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
This discussion's focused purely on money. Is that correct? Is that the scope of the discussion?
That
Not
we
on
wanted to
safety?
respond to your
Yes.
request for information. Of course, if you would like more information, I might be able to answer some of the safety questions because I've been in many of those meetings. But if you wanted a more detailed response from your chiefs, that would need to be rescheduled.
Any other questions? Okay, comments?
I have a quick 3-minute presentation if I can make it, if that's okay. I don't know what the
You certainly may.
Cool, excellent. First of all, I just want to say, thank you for continuing to support this event. Many cities have associated themselves with events and made themselves famous over events. The Monterey Jazz Festival is probably the most notable. Following the who, what, where, when, and how format, we're going to breeze through this real quick, just considering the time. If I could have access to this laptop, that'd be great. Solano Avenue Stroll were produced by the Solano Avenue Association since 1974. Just some fun facts. Solano Avenue Association is a 15-person voluntary board of directors and 1 beyond full-time staff person. 3 of our volunteers are here tonight. The SAA board is made up of diverse professionals. Most are business owners on or near Solano Avenue. The members of the SAA help fund the cost of the festival while enjoying other benefits of being a member of the association year-round. Solano Avenue Stroll is a free street festival held in Albany, Berkeley, California. It's one of the few festivals statewide that cross into 2 cities' jurisdictions, which is really cool. Every second Sunday in September has nothing to do with Labor Day, and known famously in the Bay Area as one of the most traditionally loved community events. How? So the primary organizing of the festival takes roughly 600 hours, which does not include volunteer hours. So that's roughly 3 months of full-time work dedicated to this event, and we can document that. In 2018, hard expenses for the festival were $35,000. So let's just say that the city's contribution is $35,000. That's paying for hard expenses, and we'll go over that in just a second. And I'm sorry if I sound defensive at times, it's just my nature. 2018 ancillary expenses were $18,000. So that basically covers everything below $500. Printing no parking signs, coffee for volunteers in the morning, an assortment of things. Why do we do this? Well, it's to bring fans and consumers both locally from neighboring communities to enjoy existing businesses while showcasing any new businesses on Solano Avenue. Outside vendors are used to offset the event costs to the SAA members. We locate them in locations along the avenue in non-business areas and in front of businesses who choose not to contribute financially to the event production costs, which are $53,000. Some really interesting numbers here. Oftentimes we hear, this event just draws a lot of out-of-town people, which is great because we love people from out of town. But in 2013, we employed a team of teenagers, and from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., we polled everyone that walked by Santa Fe in Solano, and the second area was set up at Colusa in Solano. And what we found, polling everybody what their zip codes were, that 73% attended from Alameda County, and 22% from Contra Costa County. We continually look for opportunities to create additional connections to our neighbors in West Contra Costa County. We're just talking about how we're El Cerritos downtown, we're Pinol's downtown. The rest of the people kind of stay in Berkeley where they are at, in the Elmwood or wherever. So the top zip codes in 2013 were 706, number 1, 707, number 2, number 3, 94530. The event features almost 200 nonprofit organizations who are centered in the local area. So that means there are 200 groups that are nonprofits that use this for fundraising. The Alameda County Library gives out more library cards or issues more cards that day. The pet adoption, the Berkeley animal shelters, they do not do on-site adoptions, but that Monday, tons of people that went to the stroll come down, they clear out their shelters. 75 performance groups. It's a once-a-year tourist-level foot traffic and 150 crafters who hand-make their items. So basically this venue is providing bands with a place to show off, to showcase their talent. It's providing 200 nonprofit organizations as a fundraising and a venue to increase the awareness about what they do, and the 150 handcrafters who sit around a TV and manufacture their products by hand. These are true handcrafters. We'll speculate about the 15,000 that's out there in the cloud that the city may or may not contribute to. I will speculate there's $15,000 in sales tax generated that day. I know for a fact Albany Subaru sells 2 cars. 2 every year. So the sales tax figures, I think, have to be, addressed eventually along with the other kind of things that we speculate. As far as the $36,000 that I mentioned in hard expenses, I just want to pass these around real quick. The great news about the $35,000 is that if you're going to be in the event production business, you're getting a bargain. Because as you see, the $35,000 does not include labor to produce the event. So remember, 3 solid months. It also does not include, not on this list, our promotional fees. The electronic billboard at Golden Gate Fields, radio advertising. These are things that vary year by year, but these are actually hard costs that we experience every year. So if you look at 2016, our actual hard costs
Alan?
for the festival were $25,000.
I'm sorry, if you're speaking over there, it doesn't get captured.
The hard cost of $25,000 that increased to $35,000. So I say it's a bargain. It's great that to have some numbers to bring the Periscope up on this. I think Jeff spent a lot of time and effort digging through this, so that's great. I think it's awesome that the city gives us an opportunity to talk about it and to brag about it, because it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it's costing, you're paying about 1/5 of the bill. And this is the other news. If you were going to be in the business of throwing a festival and you paid an outside vendor $50,000 to do this festival, you would not have them year-round like you have the Solano Avenue Association. We have 4 other events. We do monthly mixers. We do a host of things. There were times when you paid an outside vendor to come into town and throw a festival and then walk away. We throw the festival, we hand clean the street the next day. That's how much we care and how much we're invested in the community. We're not just an outside organization that comes in, throws a party, and leaves.
We know we're very fortunate. Thank you, Alan.
Are there any questions?
Thank you. Questions from the council for Alan?
I have one to start. Is how much do you charge your vendors?
It depends. The nonprofit rate is $150. We actually have not raised that since 2013. A food vendor is $805.
805?
Yeah.
Okay.
That includes a $200 health department permit. You see how expensive those health department permits on that line? That's $5,000 minimum in just food permits. And most of them are the restaurants on Solano Avenue, we're proud to say, who still have to pay for a food permit to be outside, to be clear.
What about the craft people?
We just raised them up slightly. It's about $200.
So what is your total revenue on your booths?
Off the top of my head?
Just a rough figure, you know.
I don't want to be at a city council meeting and say that and have it be incomplete. Our gross income in 2017 was $141,624.
141,620.
Okay, I'm sorry to do this to you. So you figure 500 vendors and the average is going to be about 300 a booth. 200 a booth, I'd say, with 400 to 500 vendors. It's broken down here as 51 parade entries, 80 crafters, 26 food booths, 67 commercial booths, and 166 nonprofits. And that was 2017, which was a slow year because it was not a voting year and there were some other factors. I don't have the numbers from 2018 on me. Bye, puppy.
So the 141,
Pardon me? That does not include any, that 400 to 500 number includes Solano Avenue Association numbers, so it's in the reality about 300 outside vendors, and that's the average. And again, if you take out parade, 80 crafters from 2017, 26 food vendors, 67 commercial vendors, and 166 nonprofits.
Other questions? Okay, other comments from the public? No? All right, Alan, thank you so much.
Sure, and just one other item that just came up at a recent board meeting. There are 260 frontline businesses on the street, meaning ground floor, like right on Solano. It doesn't count off Solano or second floor. And of the 260, we have 175 members. That's roughly 74% district saturation. For a voluntary membership organization, that's huge. And those numbers only continue to go up, especially as our leadership, for instance, our board president is a fourth generation Albany person. And so as our board architecture changes in that way and becomes more local, our membership numbers only increase. We're very proud of it. Thank you. Thank you.
Looks like we have a comment. Come on up, come to the microphone, please. Sorry about that, but this is part of how we do business here. Thank you for coming up.
I am a member of the Solano Avenue Association Board, and I just want to make sure that everyone does know that it is a nonprofit. There is no real profit.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you. Okay. I think we are done. We are down to other business.
Wait, I'm not done.
No, sorry.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you ask for comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. Probably being the only person in the room who has been to every single stroll. I remember Thursday nights on Solano. Most of you aren't even that old. Anyway, so take this in the spirit in which it's being given that, and Joey was certainly she thought it was all about her. But anyway, I always have concerns about the safety factor. It's a lot of people, and we live in a very, very scary world. And I would like to have that conversation at some point so that, we are responsible, and I'd like to be sure that our chiefs and you and the city really feel like we can manage this event. Because it's so easy for it to go wrong and then to look back and think, oh. So I would like to have that discussion. And not in a way that says, no, you can't do it, but to reassure us as policymakers that we're good.
Yeah. Okay, other comments?
Sure. I want to thank staff for compiling this information, and thank Alan for his presentation as well. I think it's important. I don't think anyone should feel like they have to be defensive about the preparation of data in this way. I think it's important for transparency, and it's important for the work of the city that we surface all costs, and I look forward to more presentations like this in the future about other programs in the city so that we as a council can decide where we put our resources and where we put our money, or where our resources are going, and if we have to put them somewhere else. I think the Solano Stroll is an awesome and important event, and I would agree with you about, Alan, about all the things that it does for the two cities. To me, the figures show that the hard costs may not be that much, but in a city with limited revenue and limited staff, we do have to be concerned about all costs, but particularly about staff time. So my hope would be that we could figure out a way for us to use less staff time for an event like this, particularly for someone like Jeff, for example. I don't want to pick on Jeff, but just knowing that all the balls that he has to have in the air about community development and business development and all that, I'd love it if there was some way that we could pay for a part-time person to come during the time up to the stroll and maybe manage some of that stuff for the city, rather than having the city staff directly have to be involved with some of these things. So I don't have any, I'm not involved in this. I don't have any particular, I don't know how something like this would go down, but I would urge us to all think about some clever solution like that to alleviate alleviate the draw on the staff time.
Further questions?
I do have one more question. What does Berkeley put into this? And that includes the entire gamut.
So they are able to quantify their in-kind services pretty extensively, and it looks like about a $35,000 investment, considering the street is mostly Albany. But they also charge, I mean, Jeff's dollar figures were quite generous. They average out at about $40 an hour, which is cool. Berkeley charges a very strict $200 an hour for a police lieutenant. And for every one lieutenant, there has to be 2 sergeants, and those are $150 an hour. And for every 2 sergeants, there's 10 police officers, and those are X amount. And so they have it really broken down. They haven't done the analytics, I think, in a couple of years, since their whole special event department, they have a dedicated department now that deals with special events. And ever since that special event department took over, they no longer quantify those things. And they also do give us a $5,000 cash sponsorship as well. I think part of the reason why this the event is the success that it is, frankly, is there's no alcohol, and the restaurants do a good. They're responsible in terms about $5 stroll margaritas. They don't want to get the public too messed up, and safety is our #1 concern. It's a clean event, luckily, so we're not the Pride Festival. I'm not saying that they're a larger target. I'm just saying that. In terms of regional competition, we're a pretty light festival. It's free. But one of the things, the outgoing police chief wanted to see eventually were cameras recording the events at the festival through the day. Most of the emergency operations don't take place on site at any public festival or any public venue. The emergency center is off-site. And what happens is there's a detachment between them and the district, so they can't see physically what's happening on Solano Avenue. And cameras are very important in terms of reverse forensic science. The Boston bomber would have never been caught if it weren't for video stuff. So, but there's also political issues and public issues with cameras. So there's a large discussion that we would love to engage in terms of public safety. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just a comment. I've enjoyed the festival for years, particularly once I got to ride on the fire truck. But
I have your picture right here, though.
But where Peggy mentioned safety, and that should be the #1 concern.
Oh, absolutely.
I've seen that over the years you've gotten better at an issue that's closer to what I'm interested in, which is how you deal with the trash and the recycling and sorting that out. And I'm hoping you can continue on that path, perhaps someday with a requirement of food vendors to use only compostable materials, no plastic, and maybe go for that goal of getting plastic as much as possible, bags, plastic utensils, plastic anything out, off.
It's actually required by the health department now. It's required by the health department at street festivals.
Yeah.
That it's all
well, it's a challenge, but anyway, that's the goal that I would.
Everybody in this room cares about the cleanliness of the street, I'll tell you.
What is required?
They'd be compostable. In fact, the city of Berkeley hires a consultant. Her name is Mary Munyat, but she's commonly known as Green Mary, who has suggested for many years that we get rid of the paper towels at the hand washing stations, because when your hands are wet, you could easily just wipe them off in your hair. So she's very, and she goes around to all the food vendors and inspects what they're doing and looks for, probably this year she'll be looking for straws. So whatever she's doing, she seems to be doing it well. The garbage output's low for this event, for the magnitude of this event. Yeah. The poundage that Waste Management is able to give us is really low.
And I think that's mostly my comments. I was trying to think of something to say about the empty line under portable facilities for 2016.
That was my college fund. Now, I was bragging to the board earlier about how Solano Stroll always gets a lot of positive press, and it's important to maintain that, that profile out in the press world. And with the exception of 2016, you know, we've also given the town a lot of positive press too. You know, we did not end 2018 with a shooting at the BART trail. So it's good that the media covers it the way that they do. And
Okay.
so.
Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Thanks for the input. So you're going to help out with.
Absolutely.
All right. There's a commitment there.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Let me know if there's any additional questions.
All right, we are down to other business, announcement of events, and future agenda items.
I have a future agenda item.
Okay.
I would like us in the near future to agendize our council statement. I believe that is separate from our vision and from our, whatever that other thing is, our values or our mission and our vision. I think those are separate. Those two go together, and our council statement's separate, and I'd like to agendize that.
Councilmember Pilch, Councilmember Moss?
Nothing.
Okay, my only issues would be the ones that we identified in discussing the strategic plan. I think that perhaps a procedural discussion would be a good idea, and then subsequently a subsequently scheduled substantive discussion, so that we're all in agreement about what is planned, the framework for it, and then we can make it happen. I also have the subcommittee reports on the Alta Bates situation and on the bulb situation are both items that should be agendized, and I'm sure that. As I'm driving home, I'll think of more, but we'll continue to have very full agendas, I'm sure. All right, anything else for the good of the order? Then we are adjourned.